Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 15th, 2024 council meeting. Can we have the roll?
Councilmember Evans?
Present.
Councilmember Edwards?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Here.
Mayor Millman?
Here.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Present.
Councilmember Arndt?
Here.
Councilmember Talyor?
Here.
Can we rise for the flag salute, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move to approve the agenda in order and content.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. We have two special presentations. Okay. First up, we have a presentation from the YMCA with Kirsten Poma. Did I pronounce the last name right? Kirsten Poma. Kirsten, thank you.
I feel like my voice is loud enough to be heard, but I will speak in here. Hi, everybody. My name is Kirsten Poma. I am the Executive Director of the North Shore YMCA. Began my position in December of 2023. I do have some history with the YMCA previously as a Healthy Living Director, but I am new to the role of Executive Director. And my goal for this evening is to speak with you and present a little bit more information about the Carol Edwards Center. I know that this is a joint collaboration with the city of Woodinville, and my hope is to kind of explain where we've been over the last few years and where I'm hoping that we can go in the future. Go ahead with this slide, thank you. First of all, just a little more information about the North Shore YMCA, which I think is important. We try to start all of our presentations this way with our mission, with our equity statement, and our focus areas. And I know I have a short amount of time, so I won't read those. I do think it's important, at least the mission statement, to build a community where all people, especially the young, are encouraged to develop their fullest potential in spirit, mind, and body. This is something that I think we all try to embody ourselves at the YMCA as staff and try to pass along to our community members as well. Go ahead, thank you. Just a little history about the YMCA, a special picture in there for Councilmember Arndt. The Carol Edwards Center was named after Carol Edwards. She came to the area in 1976 and really was instrumental in starting so many of the things that we know today for the city. The North Shore Weekly, Farmers Market, a parade called the All Fools Parade. She's considered the mother of Woodinville, and I think that's kind of neat that we don't forget where the name actually came from for that center. The city of Woodinville named the location in her honor upon her death in 2007. In 2011, the city began leasing the North Shore Y, to the North Shore Y, the location, the Carol Edwards Center, so that we would act as the city's parks and recreation provider or operator. From 2011 until its renovation start in around 2019-20, the Carol Edwards Center, we call it the CEC for short, shared the space with city officials for a long time who had to listen to sounds such as the kids crying in our daycare area, preschool kids giggling and running around, basketballs and soccer balls bouncing in the gym, thumping music for dance and exercise, fitness classes, and a lot more. So we did share that space for a long time comfortably. After the pandemic and the reopening of that space in 2021, the Y housed weekly pickleball games and some youth sports leagues as well, primarily basketball. But I will admit that it was, I think, a slow and rocky start. I was not here at the time. We did have and have had quite a transition of leadership over the last few years, and certainly, as for everybody else's experience, the pandemic did not help us. The Early Learning Center was opened across the walkway from the main building of the Carol Edwards Center. And in 2023, the Community Meal Program came online with the King County, a grant from the King County Housing Authority to provide meals for City of Woodinville residents specifically. We currently have and serve 26 families in the Greenbrier area. It was a little bit of a slow start to try to find the right places for us to be able to get this food to people, but we do have definitely the capacity to grow more, and we're beginning to find those places where people need that service. As far as our future, oh, I'm sorry. Will you go back? Thank you. As far as the future goes, I think we all have a similar goal in mind of increasing the activity in the space. We want to see the thousands of group exercise and fitness enthusiasts coming back through the door again. We would love to see pickleball there 3, 4, 5, well, right now it's 3 times a week, and we'd love to see it 5 times a week. We have a robust youth sports program that happens in the evenings and on the weekends. Councilmember Arndt expressed an interest in potentially some citywide family dodgeball, which is why that picture's up there. But there are these opportunities, I think, for us to really explore into the future. We at the Y are very interested in reestablishing a program called the Food Stability Program, separate of the Community Meals Program, and this provided what we called totes to go, backpacks for the kids in elementary, junior, and high schools. To give them food over the weekends and during the summers when they did not have as easy access to their food sources. Obviously, partnerships, as we have, need to be explored some more and trying to figure out what that will look like for all of us involved. And of course, dreaming big for the what ifs, what could possibly be. So I do want to just share a little bit about what we've done this year. This is as much information as I've been a part of, and can share a little bit about the changes from 2023. And then open to questions, comments, and dream big ideas. Go ahead, thank you. So our youth programs over this summer, we served the summer camp program operated out of both rooms in the Carol Edwards Center. We have a large gymnasium, we have a large conference space or a fitness kind of studio, although it was quite large. So we operated 221 weeks of camp between the 2 spaces with 108 individual campers. So every single day for 10 weeks, our campers were over there playing sports or doing specialty activities and really utilizing that space to a great degree from morning until early evening. We operate youth sports over there from ages 3 to 15, basketball, indoor soccer, floor hockey, pickleball, of course, and then we've done some sports sampler clinics that dabble in badminton or volleyball, and just for a lot of our young kids, introducing them to the idea of sportsmanship, camaraderie, and play, really, as an activity. We do at the Early Learning Center, we have capacity in there to grow to 125 children. Right now we're at 85 children. So this is, I think, a great opportunity for us in spreading the word about this program. We are licensed childcare for infants to preschoolers. And then we've hosted 8 families have had their birthday parties in that location as well. We do what's called a game on party, where we basically get all the balls and game activities out, and their birthday party comprises basically a running around after each other with any form of game and activity that there is, with supervision from the Y. Don't worry about that. Okay, go ahead, thank you. For our adult programs, as I mentioned, we do have pickleball right now, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 4 hours per day. We hosted a pickleball tournament in the spring, where we had 16 very avid participants, and there was a fight to the end, and we had two teams actually win the golden paddle. So we had to make we had one golden paddle to give away. We ended up having to make two for our folks. And we're just looking to continue to grow on that trend and that opportunity. We have started doing yoga classes over there Mondays and Wednesdays in the morning. We have not seen the traction on that we were hoping to. It is free to go in for YMCA members in general, and a $5 drop-in fee for Woodinville residents. Go ahead. Thank you. And then just in terms of the opportunities we've had for community engagement and sort of different ideas, as I mentioned, we do have that community meal program that we store our food in the Carol Edwards Center kitchen. We have provided space rentals for not just birthday parties, but holiday parties, staff meetings, board meetings. We had memorial services over there. It's a large space with a lot of opportunity that we're trying to capitalize on to just bring more people into the area. Summer movies on the Grand Lawn. Breakfast with Santa, Winterfest is coming up soon. We have hosted a couple of sound bath healings, which is that picture in the lower right-hand corner. A very nice Zen experience. If anybody is, once a quarter, we are able to host those open to the community, and it provides a really nice location. It's absolutely beautiful in there, as well as a wonderful feeling when you're finished as well. So we're looking to do more engagement with the community, and I think that's it. My last slide is questions, if anybody has questions, and then a thank you. That is my contact information. If anybody's interested or curious about more things, I'm happy to have you reach out to me.
Thank you, Kirsten. Any questions? Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. Can we go back to this slide with the adult programming? Because what this looks like to me is not very inclusive. So if pickleball, that's for people who don't work. Yoga, that's for people who don't work. Mm-hmm. So what are the blockers keeping you from being more inclusive for the whole community of Woodinville?
Right now we have, in the afternoons and evenings, we host all of our youth sports in the gym anyway. We host our youth sports practices and games on Saturdays. We have tried looking at other classes to offer. We do have a staffing limitation. This has been one of our absolute biggest struggles, to find people who are able to work in those evening hours or later afternoon hours. The classes that we can offer there in the present moment, we do not have any fitness equipment other than our yoga mats. Or dance classes, for example. And so we have repeatedly been looking for people who are able to provide those classes. We have not been as successful. We do have a larger contingency, of people at our North Shore branch in Bothell, and so we've started classes over there. They are full, but they're not at capacity to the point that we have to be able to expand that. And then a lot of the time, our instructors feel like it's a very long drive to come over to the Carol Edwards Center. We're trying to, dissuade them of this notion, but it does get challenging with staffing. I would say that's our largest issue.
And how many kids are you serving with these afternoon and evening, and are they every single day?
It is every single day. We have about 650 kids that have gone through our youth sports program to date this year.
So right now you have 650 kids coming.
We have every session or every season, we would have between 300 and 400 kids, and that's between both the Woodinville location and our Bothell location.
Okay, so specifically here in Woodinville, how many are we serving?
This location has between the mini sports, so all of our sports sampler academies and clinics, and then the practices, it has around a third of that total number. So I would say between 100 and maybe 120 kids come through from Monday to Saturday. On Saturdays, we host games for other YMCAs that are part of our tournaments, and so we play between both here and the North Shore Y, and then host in different branches, typically the Shoreline location.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I had a comment and question. Thank you for all the great work. You mentioned wanting to expand the meals program. I would suggest that maybe reach out, or through me, you could reach out to our first responders who, through the Shop with a Cop program, actually have identified families with needs.
Okay.
So I think that might be a good resource if you're looking to expand that.
Thank you.
I get emails occasionally on, it's my understanding, my boys have all graduated college, so we're not in the North Shore School District anymore, but I'm hearing from parents that they're cutting back on art programs and athletics and that type of thing. So I get emails on occasion of people wanting to do, there was a local, I think junior high, wanting to do a wrestling program as an example, which would be great for Carroll Edwards. You roll out they have their own wrestling mats. There's no damage. You don't need, it's not really, there's no damage to the facility. They might do it to themselves, but there's no.
Right.
What is your thought on that? Is that a possibility when it's not being in use, or?
Absolutely, and I actually met with that group, and one of, I think, our bigger issues with that is storage for those mats, because they are, from their description, very large, would not fit into any of the only storage location that we have, which is currently filled with chairs and tables and then our yoga equipment. So then those mats would need to sit in the room all the time. I don't think that's an issue, but then when we're trying to host a memorial service, for example, where do we roll those to? Because we know that the gym is also being used for something. I think it's the logistics a lot of times that get us kind of hung up on where do we put things when they're not being used.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Catherine Hollis, Eastrail Partners. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Evans, who sits on the Regional Eastrail Advisory Council and probably knows just about everything I'm about to share. But thrilled to be here to talk about the trail and also for other folks here. Want to start with just the map of this 42-mile trail corridor. The solid lines are open areas, and the dotted lines are still looking for funding or being constructed. But there's a lot more green on this map than I think when I presented here at Council. It might have been about 2 years ago. So pretty exciting as we think about the changes. And that is a section of Woodinville, section of Eastrail. The lavender fields are to your right, and Chateau Saint Michel is to your left. Eastrail Partners, just to give a little background on our role, we are the nonprofit partner for this 42-mile trail effort that stretches from Renton to Snohomish. It is a very multi-jurisdictional effort, as you all know, with 8 entities, and our work is really to unify and catalyze the effort and make this trail an exceptional resource for everyone living and working and visiting the East Side. So today, really, I just want to take some time to say congratulations to City of Woodinville for your work and how this has gone from an idea to underway in a really short amount of time. I'd like to also share updates on some of the projects to the north and south of you all, and then also just hopefully have time for any questions or comments. So next slide. You all, congratulations, and congratulations to all the work that I know city staff has put into this. But, in this past year, you all have gone from rail banking and that celebration, really successful in putting together funding for the SR 202 trestle. And, look at this wonderful view from the southern point of Eastrail and Woodinville. So what we're really excited about is for more shots like that bottom right of people being able to be excited to be out on the trail. We've just been honored to be able to partner with you all to ensure that Woodinville priorities are baked into the Eastrail Regional Advisory Council priorities and legislative, and also to help really build those coalitions that bring our legislators into support at the state and federal level so we can have more wins like this. Next slide. I'm now going to take you on a little tour of some of the other areas of the trail, and this is really, in large part, just to say this is why the work you all are doing here matters, because you're connecting to. Woodinville is really the north-south connector in this 42 miles, and there's a lot going on, and it's really exciting. So last December, we opened the North Up Connector in northeast Bellevue, and when I say we, this is actually a project that Eastrail Partners was able to build on behalf of King County, so it was owned by King County. They really didn't have the time frame to be able to implement it until quite a few years later. With this connector, so the Eastrail is in the right-hand side of your screen, the 520 trail corridor is on the left-hand side. There's now a safe, easy connection between those two pieces of infrastructure. And for folks who are way better cyclists than I am, you can fully go all the way around the north side of Lake Washington. You can start in Woodinville, you can go up and around the north side of the lake on the Sammamish River to the Burke-Gilman, then come back down on the 520, and come back up on Eastrail. So you can do that whole loop now fully on regional trails, which is pretty exciting. Next slide. This past year, we also celebrated the opening of light rail on the east side and the Wolverton Light Rail Station, which is the first direct connection where light rail and a trail have been planned in conjunction. So, we like to say this is where trail and transit meet. And while this is the future in Woodinville, at some point there are going to be these kind of connections. So the resources you are putting in now to the regional trail network here makes these connections for citizens here, but also as we think about commuting and how our larger region is going to change. It's pretty neat to see all those bikes that those were all folks who rode the Eastrail down to that opening. Next slide. King County Parks officially broke ground on the Wilburton Trestle project. It will be opening in 2026, so it's a little further south in Bellevue. When this project opens, it means you can take Eastrail from just north of Factoria all the way to Woodinville, uninterrupted on trail. That was a crazy idea 4 years ago. So Woodinville is truly being connected to the rest of the east side through this trail. Next slide. This is another King County project in Woodinville. It's the Northeast 8th Street overcrossing. It's a bridge that's basically adjacent to the light rail, so it is part of that direct connection. It's a gorgeous bridge that takes you over, I think, 7 lanes of traffic in Bellevue. There's also a really neat example of bringing community into this work, that there's a direct partnership with the Japanese American agricultural community, and there's artwork embedded in the bridge and on both sides that showcase and reflect the history of the Japanese American agricultural community in that area. This is where their warehouse stood. They couldn't use the main warehouse as people of color. They had to have their own warehouse. And the Eastrail is also where, as a country, we shipped our Japanese American citizens to concentration camps. So it's a really powerful space to walk through. And it hits me every time I'm up there, and you can see someone who's obviously out on a bike ride for exercise, stop and take it in. So it's a really neat example of how we can bring community into this kind of work. So again, planting seeds for all the work we're about to do up here in Woodinville. Next slide. Snohomish County, so our partners to the north have officially started their well banking process. So City of Woodinville is ahead of them, but this really unlocks this 12 miles into the town of Snohomish, and then all the regional trails in that county. It was actually out with their deputy county executive today, walking that stretch as we think about just sort of some of the economic pieces with that too. Wineries here, wineries in Maltby, thinking about wallets on bikes. I think we have a lot of neat opportunities as we think about Woodinville really being this connection between the north end of a lot of regional trails and south into King County. Next slide. But something else that happened this year is you all got a federal raise grant for planning the Eastrail in Woodinville. Congratulations. I know it was a lot of work for you all as electeds, for city staff. It's pretty unheard of how quickly you all got a raise grant for trail planning. And it, truly, again, as we think about the difference in a year, it's really exciting. And we are just also very honored to be able to echo our support on these kind of projects and these kind of applications to really be that nonprofit partner that can help bring community voice in and be another voice to our delegation on these kind of things. So we most definitely look forward to continuing to support and partner with you all as things go forward here. And we're also really excited that the stretch in Woodinville is one of 2 areas along the 42-mile corridor that's really set up for trail-oriented development. And when I say that, you all already have an example of Eastrail Flats, that developer started thinking about this before the trail was even, it was still rail banked at the time. But as that's one of the things that we are really excited about as an organization, is thinking about how we can think of this being more than a trail. And it's really here in Woodinville and the Wilburton section in Bellevue that are really set up for really thinking about building and development, having 2 front doors, one to the street, one to the trail. So also excited to continue to work with you all on how to think about that and inspiration. So also wanted to invite any of you all who are interested, happy to take you to other sections along the corridor. I'm sure many of you all have seen other sections of the trail, but can be pretty neat to bring other folks together and have some of those conversations to learn from as we think about this 42-mile stretch. Next slide. So really just looking forward to more of this as we think about the next few years and look forward to our partnership. So the last slide is that big map again. But that's what I've got. I just wanted to really just say kudos and thank you. We look forward to more and hopefully update some of you all who aren't following this as closely as maybe Councilmember Evans is on some of the projects that are happening north and south.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you for the presentation. We're looking forward to this being part of the community. It's a great opportunity for our residents to enjoy. It's also an opportunity for people to come to Woodinville as an economic stimulus and for people to commute and get around our town. And it's a great opportunity. We're starting, so everybody knows, we're starting on the 24th of this month. We're kicking off the design and the planning for the Eastrail corridor and some other things. We have a guest speaker coming, starts at 6 o'clock here in council chambers. So it's really starting the design and planning of this, and we have a great opportunity to transform our city. So I really appreciate it. Councilmember Evans.
I just want to echo that. Thank you for all your work. Bringing together all these different municipalities to create a continuous trail is not an easy thing for a nonprofit to come in and do, and I just really appreciate all the work that you and your staff have done and all the support that you've given all of the municipalities in trying to get funding so that we can complete this really important regional trail. I'm also really happy that you've been talking with our Snohomish County partners. I know I have as well. I'm very excited to see what we can do if we can get into the Centennial Trail to have more than 80 miles of trail continuous. So anyway, just thank you for all the work that you do.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have public comment. Okay, public comment. When I call your name, come to the microphone. You'll have 3 minutes and state your name and whether you live in the city limits. First up is Marilyn, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure I can pronounce that last name. Okay, thank you.
I was here last Tuesday or Wednesday. I was here, and I was at the right place but the wrong time, it turns out. So I had to come back, and I'll be saying something of what I said then. So I'm here to talk about rent protection, Michelle Evans gave me an idea that I did some research on. I'm going to briefly mention it. And although I will probably be dead in 20 years, I do want to live here for 15 more years, but I don't have enough money to do that at the rate the rents are going up. And the rents are determined by the market and the average gross median income of King County, which is $120,000 a year. Whereas we elders on fixed income, like where I live at Greenbrier, Senior Heights, have our rent determined by the income of active workers, particularly tech workers. So in Greenbrier, which is a tax credit place, it has been serving low income, that's where I live, people for 20 years. But since the tech big income dominates Woodinville, my rent has nearly doubled in 6 years. As of now, my rent is the same as my income. Not very good. At this point, at this rate of raising rent, I will not be able to stay here. I'm partially handicapped and I can't move out of state. I love it here and I've been in Seattle East Side since 1989. So I did some research and I found out there's a company called Arch, and I talked to the rental person involved in renting, and I would like to involve the city in what he said because it might be free money somehow. That's the impression I got. I need the city of Woodinville to help the owner of Greenbrier, who is dragging her feet on this, I guess, to take advantage of some funds that might be available to help. I think these are gift funds from what I understood. And these are called Housing Trust Fund and the Housing Preservation Program. So if the city could kind of light some fire under the owners of Cirque, that's the company that owns us, and you can call the Arch representative at 925-322-2160. We are grateful for your help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ahmad Amiri.
Good evening, council member, and thank you for opportunity always. I appreciate that. My name is Ahmad Amiri, and I live in the city of Woodinville more than 35 years, 37, 38 years, more than that even. As noted in the memo to the comprehensive plan, minimum lot size regulations significantly influence the price of housing and impact. I want to add that the city imposed other regulations that have an equal impact. In my case, although I own an acre of property zone R8 with a sewer and in a city limit behind the museum, I cannot develop it due to the outdated regulations regarding private roads. The key issue is private roads. Currently, private roads are limited to maximum of 4 homes. In my case, this effectively gives my property a 1 acre minimum lot size with no alternative. Homeowners on private streets are incentivized to tear down perfectly good homes and replace them with a massive multi-million dollars compounds. Allowing additional infill is clearly better outcome. As I have mentioned several times, Woodinville standards on private roads are among the most inflexible and restrictive in a state. There is no need for this level of restriction. Addressing this issue could be done simply and would help address the goal of increasing its housing stock and affordability. If the city wants to meet these goals, it should make addressing this issue a top priority. Therefore, I ask council members to vote to have this issue taken up by the planning committees. 2 of you would be sufficient even. I'm going to do an addition to what I was saying, I was just thinking about. For cities and neighborhoods within cities where it is anticipated that redevelopment is likely to occur, there are proactive measures required to address this issue. It's a common sense that we look at it because we are looking at the 2 different things. One is group of people who come in middle housing and residential. My hope is, I really hope, that you look into it and you will give this a go-ahead and let the commissioners look at it and at least to look at it and give you a recommendation on it. That's all I can hope for. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Jeff Lyon.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jeff Lyon. I live in the city limits. At the June 18th City Council meeting, an agenda item, NPRSA potential site identification, was followed by an executive session, quote, to consider the acquisition of real estate when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price. At the June 26th Planning Commission meeting, Mayor Millman reported that he instructed city manager to pursue property, revealing at least a portion of what was discussed in the session. Fast forward to August 28th NPRSA meeting. Mayor Millman gave a comment detailing the exact location of the land that the city hopes to acquire, further revealing what was discussed at the executive session, and indicating that the city will use eminent domain if necessary. In my mind, eminent domain is for anything but the most critical, using eminent domain for anything but the most critical need, in my mind, is theft. From this information, I went to the parcel mapper and identified 3 properties: 0190, owned by KPM Woodinville LLC, 0195, White's Carver Properties LLC, 0210, Donald W. Gonzalez, total appraised value $4.8 million. The CIP presented at the August 6th meeting has $6 million set aside for North Shore Community Center property. This is exactly 20% over the appraised value of those 3 properties, which makes sense when you consider that you should add a buffer when you're negotiating for real estate that sometimes sells for over the tax value. Why do I care about this? It's because these properties could be as much as 10 times as valuable if they were included in a future EMU zone. Either A, we're ripping off these property owners, or B, the property owners will learn what's happening and we will pay a huge premium that we cannot afford. Neither are acceptable. The only reasonable and ethical option is to abandon this plan. Thank you.
Jennifer Drury.
Thank you, council members. My name is Jennifer Drury, and I'm a resident of the Wedge and Woodinville. I'm here as a parent in the North Shore School District and a citizen of Woodinville and a member of the Washington State PTA. And I'm here to address Initiative 2117, which is on the agenda tonight. Washington State PTA opposes Initiative 2117. Washington State PTA is the oldest and largest volunteer child advocacy association in the state. Our 80,000 plus members support mitigating the adverse impacts of climate change, which pose a direct threat to the health and well-being of all children and youth. Washington State PTA also supports ample funding for schools and promotes safe and healthy environments for our children to live and learn. WSPTA opposes Initiative 2117, which would repeal and block the Climate Commitment Act, CCA, our state's most consequential policy to address climate change, and a significant source of our state's budget allocations. Through the CCA, payments from top polluters are reinvested directly into our homes, schools, and communities. For school districts and related infrastructure, the CCA funds projects such as energy efficiency, small district modernization, zero-emission school buses, safe routes to school, and HVAC upgrades to improve indoor air quality and comfort. These projects help schools lower operating costs, increase resilience to environmental hazards, and improve student health and safety. Community-wide investments from the CCA create a better quality of life for the towns and cities in which our children live. The majority of the CCA dollars go towards clean transportation and buildings, the 2 largest sources of pollution in Washington state, with remaining portions funding clean energy, climate justice, and resilience from escalating efforts such as heat, fires, escalating effects such as heat, fires, storms, and droughts. Removing funding for these critical projects would leave significant gaps in our state's budget and leave families, school districts, and communities vulnerable to escalating impacts. Worse, failing to meet critical climate goals would be detrimental to the health and well-being of all children and youth across the state and beyond. We must continue to invest in clean energy and transportation systems and build resilience to heat and weather-related effects if we hope to have a better tomorrow for our youth and children. Washington State PTA supports the CCA goals and opposes I-2117. We encourage all local PTAs and councils to oppose it, and for our members to vote no on I-2117. Thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Allison Farmer.
Alison Farmer, resident outside the city limits. I'm here to ask you tonight to reject the ground floor residential in Old Town. There's a William Blake poem that starts off with a factual image, to see a world in the grain of sand, and it shows how innocence is crushed by the corruption of oppressive forces. I came to this fight for Old Town with an innocence of just wanting to keep retail in our commercial birthplace and save our small businesses there. But I found out what's happening in Old Town is indicative of what's happening to the rest of our city, and it's become a fight against the oppressive forces trying to destroy it. We have a developer here that has prospectively became a contract buyer on a property with an existing DA, asking for a code change to enable a more lucrative project, and is probably going to sell the development on for a profit. These actions inflate our land prices and make affordability more unattainable. We also have a majority council using oppressive moves to allow this to happen. At the hearing, I complained we had nothing concrete for Main Street to award this request for. Well, we got a draft DA, and guess what? There's nowhere near the 10% affordability promised by them at the meeting, and it looks to be vastly underparked, which will hurt our existing businesses. There is also a second elevated row of townhomes on the site, not shown on the picture. This will take the development to much the same height as the current DA, which is criticised for. How can you grant a code change on a development you know so little about? How could you show preferential treatment to one owner and a speculative developer but ignore the wishes of the greater community impacted? The existing DA fits way better with our comprehensive plan. It offers smaller, cheaper units that could become affordable condos. It's pedestrian-friendly hub that honours our commercial history, has office space, retail, housing and structured parking, along with a 500,000 square foot park. It also has traffic mitigation with widening of 126, bike storage and a bus stop, and I submitted a written comment about the impact on our roads. There were dots on Old Town at the Creative District presentation. There is the potential to add more with the existing DA, if it never gets built. The townhomes will cut off any possibility of a future expansion dead and likely kill what's there. Main Street doesn't care. This has been said more than once. They don't care about segregating low income into tiny boxes or building a downtown development that discriminates against anyone in a wheelchair. They don't care about our existing small businesses or the history of Old Town. Well, I care, and it's now time to show that you care too. So say no to this request, and our Old Town has a future surviving and even thriving, and I can once more return to a state of innocence and the belief that its government has some conscience. Thank you.
Alex Campbell.
Alex Campbell, I live in the city limits. I'm going to just start out with a quick executive summary. Sorry, I almost said a different word, because I know I'll probably run out of time. First of all, my first point tonight will be about the Planning Commission opening. It needs to be reopened. There was insufficient advertising, and there are also significant questions about the single applicant that you're probably going to ram through anyway. Second, I will call on the council to vote against the rezone tonight, similar to other points. All the arguments you made in favor have been debunked online, and have basically been, kind of just you're making excuses for why you want to give Main Street a big profit. Coming back to the actual details. On the Planning Commission tonight, none of the previous applicants were contacted. You had their email addresses, would have been a copy and paste to send out a notice to them. There was a single post on Facebook. That's the only advertising I could find for this opening. And even there, it was under the show more option. You had to know that to read past the point where the city said, oh, we're hiring a building inspector, to find the commission link, the fact that there was an opening for a commission. It then took you 6 clicks after watching a video on where to click to get to the application, when you could have just provided a single link. So it was hidden intentionally, I believe. Secondly, I'll just give you some facts. Washington State Department of Licensing does require you to change your address within 10 days of moving. That's just a fact for to put in your back pocket. Mr. Troy Anderson voted in Bothel's precinct 3661 on August 6th of this year. He also spoke at a public comment here, like he has many times before, and did not say he lives in Woodinville. That public comment was on September 3rd. So at best, he's been in the city a couple of weeks. I have questions if even that is true. Finally, he is biased. He said so in the meeting in the public comment on September 3rd. He said he has conflicts and wants to see things rezoned because he's a realtor and wants to sell them. We don't need bias on our planning commission. It needs to be an unbiased representation of residents. Also, he is a member of the Chamber of Commerce Board who receives significant funding every year. My estimate last meeting, $200,000. So that's another bias. Moving on to Old Town, I will skip most of my points to say the other businesses will be affected because the King County Assessor does not look at the whereas statement, and they know that your arts district talk is gentrification in another name. So I'll stop there since you're going to cut me off.
Matthew Suarez.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the floor. This is my third or fourth time here speaking, but who's counting when you're having fun? Here speaking in defense of our small businesses and the cultural identity of Woodinville being threatened by uncontrolled development made by a singular company, Main Street Property Group. I approach these dialogues with an ethos of ethics, rationale, facts, and morals. However, since that level of integrity is not being reciprocated by many of our elected officials, I will be a bit more pointed and call a spade a spade. It's quite evident that Main Street Property Group has the majority of our city council wrapped around its finger. When the developer says jump, the council responds with how high. This was made blatantly evident with the attendance of Kim Faust and Kevin Merriman of Main Street at the last forum. As we pled for our livelihoods and the need of diversity in our community, Kim Faust made some smug remarks, rambled some manufactured community benefits, and left early, as if the outcome of the rezoning of Old Town in their favor was predetermined and already in the bag. I'm putting every single council member on notice that we are watching every vote, every investment made, and favor exchange with the utmost diligence. I genuinely hope that your T's are crossed and I's are dotted, because if you slip up, you have much more at stake than a re-election campaign to look forward to. I would like to emphasize that I understand that majority of the people in this room are hardworking and honest people who genuinely care about the future of Woodinville. However, keep in mind that if you enable immoral and unethical behavior, you are indeed complicit, and you do have a responsibility for your neighbors. Thank you.
Julio Ortiz.
Hi, Julio Ortiz. I live in city limits. I'm here also talking about Old Town rezoning. Trying to bring out the protection that we need to have after you guys obviously have approved the first area, and then obviously we have talked about the domino effect that's gonna create on all of our businesses. And I'm here just to remind you that you have a promise, you have a responsibility that to create something to protect all of the other developments that you guys have been thinking of for the past 5 or 10 years. You're gonna have to figure it out on how you guys are gonna protect us. Another thing about it is that obviously I got approached by someone, a Spanish-speaking person from the Chamber of Commerce from Seattle who came over and obviously went straight to the conversation of, hey, you know, I heard that you were so confused with the city council, and are you still confused because, you know, I've heard about this, I've heard about that, and we met with the mayor and this and that, and I looked at him and I really wish I would have been in Cuba. He would have lost his teeth, but obviously we're in the U.S. So it's very disrespectful of just going underneath the table, sending me someone to my place, to just go ahead and convince me of several things, even having a conversation, obviously, you know, together with the Chamber of Commerce, which obviously the Chamber of Commerce had never been in my place, and in 11 years that Obviously, I talked to Kim and all this stuff in 11 years. I've never saw her as someone who would represent me, nor I see you guys as representing me, because I've been here so many times that you don't care. The other part was that, you know, they were talking about these meetings that they were having where the mayor was part of it, and over here I was only going to have 3 minutes, and over there I will have the world and this and that. And I turned around and said, hey, you know, I've been with the decision makers right here. I've told them in their faces, you know. I've brought out the lies that they've said, like, you know, the first day that I came over here and packed this with people here dressed up in white, 100 people. Someone out there said, well, no, we're not talking about the rezoning, and it wasn't the agenda. So how could you just lie about that? It's something unbelievable that they're trying to just maneuver the situation. And I was even talking in a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and this gentleman that obviously was sent through Seattle, and he's asking me about my lease and how long the lease is, how long do you have the lease for? And I was like, you know, hey, come on, don't play me as stupid, because I'm not. So I just want to let you know that I'm not confused. Whoever is sending anybody, I'm not confused, and I know what I'm defending. All right. So thank you very much.
Okay, so first business item number 5, we have the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 767, amending WMC.
Point of order. Have we skipped over the consent calendar?
I'm sorry, did we? I'm sorry, you're right. Consent calendar.
I move to accept the consent calendar as written.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now to business item number 5, second reading and adoption of ordinance number 767, amending WMC 21.42.040 to expand the allowance for ground floor residential dwellings to face public streets in the CBD. Mr. Grumbaugh.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I do not have a presentation tonight. We've already kind of been through this through study sessions and had the first reading. The staff report does contain kind of a summary that council had requested for some additional recitals to be added to the ordinance, and so those have been included in there. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at this point.
Okay. Open up to questions for Mr. Grumbaugh. Nobody? Deputy Mayor Randolph?
All right. I move to pass second reading and adopt ordinance number 767 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Deputy Mayor Randolph, your motion, you have first discussion.
I think we've discussed this kind of ad nauseum to some degree. I think that a number of people have spoken with the tenants who are in the building to try and come to an understanding of what the efforts of the council are right now, and a lot of that's around preventing the current and trying to come up with something that is a better option and is not to remove or whatever conspiracy has been put forth. So we have hopes that that will be a better place after things go through the process. And one important piece that I want to point out to everyone involved here is that there are various steps to each piece, and we have not come to any developer agreement. So anything that's being presented as this is what's going to happen, that developer agreement has not come before council yet. So hold your horses. We're going through a long mediated process, which I know that I've explained to a number of people. So just hold on. We are going to definitely do what we said we would do. That is all.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So we aren't even on second reading. We're having it tonight. Main Street has already gone to the Planning Commission, and what was promised to council was 40 townhome units, 10% will be affordable. The presentation that was presented to Planning Commission was not that. It was 37 units, and then maybe we'll have some units over there that are definitely going to be segregated because we want to keep affordable units away from townhomes. So even before we have passed ground floor residential here as a council, they're already trying to make the deal uglier. It's already getting worse. And by the way, what this ordinance is not townhomes. It's first floor residential. So they could very well build apartments. And yes, this council will tell you they won't build apartments, but do you believe it? because I've seen Main Street go from our meeting, erase some things, change a couple of words, and present something completely and fundamentally different to the Planning Commission. And Planning Commission called it out for what it was, economic segregation. That's not what we had asked for. We had asked for everything to be included. This deal is getting worse. And the problem is we have these two concurrent issues. We haven't even approved this, and Main Street is already lobbying, already doing what they want to do. Why aren't we the ones in the driver's seat? We're making Main Street in the driver's seat, and we're just following. And this talk of, well, we've added language at the very end to protect the rest of this land. It was the weakest option of everything that we had discussed, whereas we don't intend to rezone your property. Great. Well, we never intended to rezone the property, and we just did it. Can you trust that language? No. Whereas is a declaration of whereas water is wet, whereas it rains in Seattle, whereas useless information that is not binding. It is intent, it is not binding, so don't believe it. I say that this deal is the tail wagging the dog. We are allowing the developer to go to the Planning Commission and discuss first, and then come back to us and, well, we had said we wanted townhomes, but yeah, well, I guess that's what the developer says they're gonna build, so what can we do about it? When are we gonna take control here? When is the city of Woodinville about the people in Woodinville and not the developers? First floor retail is important because every single time we remove a retail space, there's no place for them to go. Retail is going away. They can't go to industrial. They're limited to 2,000 square feet. They can't afford downtown because Main Street, coincidentally, has raised the rents. So where are these businesses going to go that's affordable? We continue to drive them out of affordable locations. We're building affordable housing, but people can't eat out because there's no affordable place to eat. So are we really making anything affordable, or are we just saying you can live here, but God knows you can't eat here and you can't shop here? This is economic segregation. This is not paying attention to the businesses that make Woodinville. I think we get rid of this. This is a horrible agreement. This is the third time that Mainstream has come in front of us, and I am not excited to see what they build. They just unveiled the new building. Don't love how it looks. That's supposed to be Northwest Woodland character. That could be any town USA. So this is a horrible deal, and now we're going to hear about all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that has been put into the minds of the people who work in that area because you dared to disagree with what this majority wants.
Anybody else? I want to address a lot of this. So the proposal that was passed by council, including Councilmember Best-Campbell in 2019, was a 7-story apartment building. The townhomes aren't going to be anything close to 7 stories. They're townhomes. They're going to be 3 stories. The traffic impact to that area, it's already a failed intersection, was going to be 1,600 average daily trips to that already failed intersection. That is a terrible agreement. That previous agreement had no negotiated public benefits. They even, Councilmember Best-Campbell even capped the school impact fees at $50,000. And this proposal that we are talking about has a lot of the council's stated vision. We have ownership opportunities available. The segregated discussion is nonsense. There's going to be a list a mile long to buy condos at $375,000. That's $375 a square foot roughly. Everything going, even previously owned stuff, is going for $500 to $1,000 a square feet. There's going to be a list a mile long of people to buy that, and on planning, that was even noted by some of our planning commissioners. So there was no segregation vote or discussion that that's what it was. We have affordable ownership. That's something that isn't going on. A lot of the affordable housing we're talking about is rental. This is somebody to start equity ownership. This new project has 0 impact fees or traffic impact to that location. 0 to an already crowded. That is our responsibility to have smart development, and that's what this is. We get 1,000 square feet of commercial built at cost. They're actually offering relocation fees for the one property that's going to be displaced at that location. I've never seen that. I don't know that Woodinville's ever done that. I'm actually a little leery of it because of setting the precedent. You know, that is something that's going to be paid for by the developer. There's talk of the bus stop. We have no control over where King County puts a bus stop, and I don't think they're going to put a bus stop there. This proposal to add ground floor residential is far better than what is currently allowed on that property, and it meets a lot of our goals, and I'm for it. And the chamber, congratulations. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing and advocating for small business, so thank you. Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Okay, a little bit of a history lesson. When we're talking about the West Point development, when the West Point development was negotiated, guess what the city didn't have? School impact fees. The city did not pay them. The former council had never done it. When we had school impact fees added, which, yes, if you were a literate sort, it does say $50,000, because we were able to get $50,000, which any thinking man would say is greater than $0, which is what we were charging school impact fees at the time. So that's the first misstatement. Nothing negotiated. That's fascinating, because Mr. Millman was on the Planning Commission at the time, loved it. Most amazing deal he's ever had, gushed about it, made the motion himself. Now he's gonna bash it because Rachel's sitting next to him, and obviously it's bad if Rachel liked it. So we're gonna create out of whole cloth fiction. We aren't talking about main floor residential there. Listen to what he's saying. We're talking about the development agreement. This hasn't passed yet. There's no right for a development agreement until we pass this now. Yet what we're talking about is the development agreement. These are two separate things. So again, we're conflating and confusing the issue, so you think we're talking about one thing when really, God knows what can grow there. Main Street has already said they're not gonna build it. They're gonna sell the property. I don't trust Main Street. I certainly don't trust how many iterations down the road whoever's gonna sell it, they're gonna come back and lobby us the same way that Main Street has. So let's get facts straight and read for ourselves and understand what happened in 2019. We actually had school impact fees for the first time in the city. So yeah, there was no by right school impact fees because we hadn't adopted them. So please, let's understand history before we start talking about future and precedent and talking about what it is that Main Street wants. I don't care what Main Street wants. I care what people want. I care what Woodinville wants. Woodinville does not want this. I have not met one real person who comes in here and says, God, get rid of Old Town. What we really want is more townhomes. What we really want in our retail core is more residential. No, that's not what I hear. I hear the character of Woodinville is gone. What is so special about this little strip that we have to put townhomes on it? If we're gonna be rezoning every other part of the city, why don't we leave that one sacred? Why? What is so critically important about that one that we've got to kill those little businesses? Well, it is a minority business area. It's at the terminus of Eastrail. We're talking about creativity. I guess we want it all to be art. So sorry, your business doesn't matter. And too bad that you can't afford any of those units that are going in that are affordable because you won't have a job anymore. So I hope that's cold comfort to you, that someone else is going to be able to buy a home because you're going to be unemployed and you'll be kicked out of yours.
Any other discussion? Questions? I'd like to address a couple of those. The school impact fees that Councilmember was talking about were coming like a couple of months after that was taken up. So capping them was necessary for some reason. I don't understand why. The current development is about $200,000 to our school district versus the 50 that it was capped. I consider that a great public benefit to our school district. We have a process where we have to go through public hearing. Then we talk about changing this. It's not a rezone. We're talking about amendment on that one parcel only. And then we pass that, and then we direct our city manager to negotiate a deal. That's his job. That's what he does on every deal, and that's what we're doing here. The plan that's being put forward to planning right now is light years better than the existing agreement. I'm very proud that this council's taken it up. It has much more. It has many public benefits versus the previous development that had zero public benefits. So I'm very proud of this. And when I was on planning, yes, we forwarded a recommendation, but what council approved was not what our recommendation was. And no, at no time did I say I loved it. It was the best project or whatever was said. That's ridiculous. So I am going to vote in favor of the ground floor residential. It's in the best interest of the city of Woodinville. It's the best interest in that neighborhood. And nobody that I know that lives anywhere near it, the people that are advocating for that, to be a 7-story apartment building, don't live anywhere near that location and don't navigate that intersection. I have navigated that intersection many, many times. It's horrible. We are not adding 1,600 daily trips to that location. So I'm going to vote in favor. Councilmember Evans.
So on Friday night, I was taking my family down to the Pizza Coop for pizza. We live just around the corner up that hill. It took 23 minutes to get down the hill. And that is as the traffic stands right now. If that 7-story apartment building went in, we would never come to Woodinville because it would add 1,600 extra trips every day. Nobody on the West Ridge would come down because it would be impossible to get down here. It is our duty to take a look at what we can do. Sometimes we are given bad choices and worse choices. In this case, as I said, if I had been in the council in 2019, I would have voted no. I would have voted no because I would have been the only person here. I wasn't on council at that time. Nobody lived on the West Ridge who was on the council. They were happy to jam this ginormous monstrosity over in this area of the city that they would not have to deal with. We have been dealing with traffic forever. There are times where traffic goes up the hill and all the way to 405. It takes forever to get down here. And if we added another 1,600, I think it would kill not just businesses in Old Town, but businesses in downtown, because you would lose people on the West Ridge, you would lose people across the street in Bothell, you would lose people in Kirkland because they'd say there's no way to get down there. And you know why there's no way? Because the state owns State Route 202. We can't expand it. There's nothing we can do to make that better. So we need to mitigate what goes in there. I am really sad that so much disinformation and lies have been spread around this city that have scared people. When you look at the facts objectively, the difference between 1,600 trips a day and a negligible 84 with the new development agreement, with an already failing intersection that we cannot expand, I don't know why anyone would advocate for the 1,600. So I'm voting yes as well, because we need to protect not just our businesses, but also the people who live and work around there. If we added that monstrosity that the 2019 council thought was so great, we would kill that area of the city forever.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Aye.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
No.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Arndt?
Yes.
Councilmember Talyor?
Abstain.
And Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1-1. Thank you. Business item number 6, interview and appointment position number 500 on Planning Commission. Mr. Buchanan.
Good evening, Council and Mayor and Council. We have our applicant this evening, as we covered in your staff reports in your packet. We did have 2 applicants through the process. One was determined to live outside the city limits and thus ineligible. So we do have 1 applicant before you this evening. Of course, your process for interviewing and selecting and appointing is entirely up to Council. Obviously, Council is familiar with how we've done that traditionally in the past. We have interview and take motions to appoint.
So I'd like to throw it out to Council. So we have, in the past, when we've had 1 candidate, we've opted not to do the interview process.
Can I ask a question of the city manager before we get started on the vote?
I have the floor, and I would like to
I'm asking before you make your motion, which you're going to make.
I'm not allowed to make a motion.
You always do.
I'm not allowed to make a motion
That
as the
doesn't mean
chair.
you don't.
I actually follow the rules. So in the past, we have, when we had 1 candidate, we have chosen to, at times, we've chosen not to do the interview process because we have one qualified candidate. We've also chosen to do the interview process, so I'm going to throw it out to council and whether they would like to do which of those processes that we would like to do. Councilmember Best-Campbell.
So how do we confirm that someone lives in city limits? You sign a form that says you live in Woodinville. Is that the only thing that we take someone at their word?
That's correct. They fill out their application, we verify that address is in city limits.
So someone could hypothetically put any address they want on an application and we just take them at face value. We don't ask for driver's license to prove that they live at that address. We just have to take it at face value.
Right, we're using the information they provide on their application. So yes, to your point, we're not checking driver's licenses and records like that.
Okay, so what I see is some confounding data. So on the one hand, we have the address that's given to us in our private packet, and I searched, and it's a rental property, which, okay, I can't verify who lives there, it's a rental property. I looked at voter records because those are publicly available, and the applicant last voted from a Bothell precinct in August. So if he's voting in a Bothell precinct, that means you live in a Bothell precinct, and if you're voting in a Bothell precinct and live in Woodinville, you're committing voter fraud. So I don't know where this applicant lives based on those two data points. And I would hope that we could at least confirm, not just on a handshake and a yes, I wrote this on my form. I want to know that whoever it is that we're gonna appoint actually does live in city limits. And the problem we had, of course, is that in previous applications, we've had 5 and 6 candidates. None of them knew to apply. It was a shorter period and it was harder to get to. And it just happens to be that this is someone who knew after living in Woodinville for presumably 2 months exactly where to go and exactly how to apply when people who've lived here for years didn't. So I think it behooves us to be very clear. Does this person for sure live in Woodinville city limits? If the form says he does, great. I would like to see something that corroborates it because 2 pieces of data show me 2 different things. And I don't want to trust anything. I want to make sure that the people of Woodinville know that we will only appoint someone who lives full-time in city limits.
Point of order. Have we ever asked a single candidate to prove beyond their application where they live?
We verify the information on the application that address given is within city limits. It's the same for the commissions. It's the same as, unless the county is doing different when you register to run for council, we don't verify the address either. So we take the information that the applicant has put on their application and verify that's in city limits.
So we have the applicant here. Mr. Anderson, do you live in the city limits? Yes. Okay, it's good enough for me. I resent no evidence is provided that our applicant doesn't live in the city limits. It's just demanding of some conspiracy theories. There's a constant attacking of our volunteers that are volunteering to serve our city. That's not what Woodinville should be about. So again, I'm asking council, do you want to have the interview process, or since we have one qualified candidate, do we want to bypass that and then we can ask Mr. Anderson to come up and maybe say a few words? Your choice. Deputy Mayor Randolph.
I would move to go ahead and appoint Mr. Anderson to the Planning Commission to fill position number 500, which expires July 1st, 2025. I would want to hear from Mr. Anderson, but not go through the full interview process just because we only have a single candidate to hear from.
So you made a motion. You're going to need a second before we go on. So we made a motion to appoint our one candidate, Mr. Troy Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Now, Mr. Randolph, or Deputy Mayor Randolph, you have the floor.
I would like to hear from Mr. Anderson just to understand his position on the commentary, but otherwise, I think we should go ahead and take the vote. Is that?
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. So Mr. Anderson and I have had a chance to serve on the Chamber of Commerce board together. I've seen his incredible commitment to the city of Woodinville. He invests time, he invests money, he supports nonprofits. He is so giving and has really made an impact on the city of Woodinville. I think that disparaging his reputation is really, really egregious from the dais. I think it's fair to ask, did you recently move? And we can have him speak to that. But we need to be very careful about attacking people who come forward to volunteer their time and their efforts and their commitment to making our city a better place. Thank you.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
If you think it's disparaging to ask if you live in city limits, but you voted in another city, then you've really got your priorities wrong. What matters is that whoever is here is representing the city because they live here. The information that I have, which is not conspiracy theory, it's called the public record. You can go to the State Department of Elections and you can find exactly the information that I found for yourself. And you will find, again, confounding information. But sure, let's say it's a conspiracy theory. Let's say Mr. Anderson has lived here for 2 months. There's the other problem that his organization on which he is a board member receives money from the city council. So wouldn't it follow that he might be beholden to whatever it is we want him to say, and he would not be an independent body, but bound by us because we provide his organization with money? This is not disparagement. This is called thinking through the process. So if you call that disparagement, that means you can't think of a reason why we can't come up with the information of, can you explain the discrepancy, which is what I had asked. Why is there an address in our packet that is different from where you voted? I wanted to ask why that was. That's not disparaging, that's a request. We're not going to get answers to that because, of course, we're not allowed to have answers to that. This has been preordained. We know exactly why this candidate was the only one. It was by design. It was hard to apply. It was hard for anyone to see. We had qualified applicants the last time. Why weren't they contacted? Seems to be Mr. Anderson was the only one who knew how to apply.
I want to speak to that. Councilmember Best-Campbell has known for maybe 2 months, a month, that there was this opening. You had an equal opportunity as anybody to inform any of the past candidates, so that implication is nonsensical. And you are disparaging somebody. I have not seen on council, our staff verifies that we have a qualified candidate, and that has been good enough as long as I've been on council, and now all of a sudden it's not. And disparaging the Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce helps our small businesses. We don't give them $200,000. They have LTAC money from taxes that goes to benefit Woodinville and does several concerts and events that they sponsor and brings revenue to the city of Woodinville. The implication that is some type of Machiavellian relationship is ridiculous. So I think that we have a great candidate that has stated that he lives in the city of Woodinville, and I have no reason, nor does anybody else have any reason to claim that that's otherwise. Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to thank the candidate for applying and taking the time to want to volunteer for our city. As someone who also applied for commissions within a year of moving the city, I understand that people move, residencies change. That doesn't mean that someone's disqualified because they decide to change their residency to move within the city. And also, I don't think being part of an organization that serves our city is a negative thing. We have conflict of interest policies within the city to resolve that issue, making sure people aren't directly involved in decisions where they have a financial interest. And with that, I would say the organizations that we do provide funding to are because they make an impact within our community. So someone taking the time to be part of these organizations and be a board member in these organizations that really benefit and serve our community, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a positive thing as long as people follow the rules that we have in place to protect conflicts of interest going forward. So I think it's a great thing that we do have people involved actually applying as well to want to serve in our commissions.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, can we roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Aye.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
No.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Arndt?
Yes.
Councilmember Talyor?
No.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-2. Congratulations. Mr. Anderson, would you care to come to the microphone and maybe say a few words? Be great. We appreciate it, and thank you for serving.
Thank you, City Manager, City Council. I took my first job here in Woodinville when I was around 18 years old at the Honda Wrecking Center right over there. So I've got pretty deep roots here. We lived in the Wedge area for about 9 years, and then moved to Kirkland after that. And then recently we did move back to the city of Woodinville because we love it here. I'm deeply committed to this community. Through my service, I've served on the board of directors for the Woodinville Chamber for 6 years or 5 years. My term ends this year, and I've served the past 2 years as the chair. And so I've just really enjoyed what the Chamber has done and what the collaboration between the Chamber and the city and how we've improved the residents' experience here and small business. I'm definitely champion home ownership and small business. They need to coexist for sure, and we need to find solutions for that. I'm an advocate for affordable housing and also affordable commercial. So whatever we can do to fix that, I'm definitely on board with trying to find solutions for that. So thank you guys, and I guess you can ask me a question or two if you want.
I'm happy that you're coming on board. You're coming on board at a crucial time in Woodinville's history. We have a generational opportunity that's in front of us for some of it was the Eastrail corridor that we're talking about, rezoning for affordable housing and other recreational opportunities that you'll have the ability to weigh in on as far as Woodinville goes. And thank you for volunteering and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor.
Business item number 7, presentation of the 2025-26 preliminary budget and public hearing. Mr. Buchanan or Mr. Fritz?
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. We've got the much anticipated preliminary budget that each of you has received in hard copy this evening. You also may not have had opportunity. We literally finished writing it this afternoon, and as soon as we had it done, got it out to you via your iLegislate app on your devices. Probably haven't had a chance, but I'm going to go through the highlights, and then, of course, Mr. Fritz and I can stand for any questions that you have. All right, our 25-26 budget. So just a quick overview of what we'll go through tonight, and we'll look as we go through the presentation. This is obviously not your only opportunity. This is the kickoff to the conversation at the council level. We'll look at kind of what the process has been thus far behind the scenes as we get a budget prepared, as I'm required to do under state statute, and present that to you this evening. So first, we'll go through that process. We'll look at some of the thought process and where those guiding principles that have led to the formation of this budget came from. And then, of course, we'll look at the city manager's preliminary budget. We'll have an overview, and we'll go through department highlights, and then look at next steps. So the process leading up to this evening has been multiple steps at both the council level. The different commissions have participated at different steps, and then obviously staff has been working quite a bit behind the scenes to get us to this evening. Starting with kind of budget-related items in July and August, we started looking at the proposed and revised CIP priority list. Council's had some different discussions on that. September 3rd is when we really kicked off at the council level in earnest the budget discussion, and that was opening the public hearing that we're continuing this evening, and we'll continue through the next couple council meetings. That was open on September 3rd and started with Mr. Fritz going through the revenue projections for the upcoming biennium. Kind of looking at the process in whole, we've gone through the first couple steps here. We're at that bottom left corner, October 15th, with the council meeting where I present this budget. You will have at least 3 more meetings before this hopefully wraps up and needs to wrap up by the end of the year. Statutorily, we have one deadline we have to hit before then, which is the end of November. We have to have a property tax ordinance adopted, first and second reading, which this schedule here provides for. I don't think that will probably be too much of an issue because we're not proposing any property tax increase, so I hope that's not a prolonged discussion on the property tax levy. Your next meeting following this one, we are taking off the November 5th meeting. I don't know that anybody's going to be able to interested in sitting through a council meeting when we have other activities that evening. But the November 12th will come back. This gives you about a month to go through this document. And I'll mention it several times this evening, and I'll mention it starting now. Of course, if you have, as you go through the document, there's a lot there. There's 100 and something pages. If you have questions, Mr. Fritz and I are very happy to sit down with you one-on-one and go through any questions or kind of walk through the budget. Don't hesitate to ask for that. But November 12th will be the next meeting of council where we'll continue this public hearing and hopefully pass first reading of property tax ordinance. Then a week later, we'll come back, hopefully conclude that public hearing and pass first reading of budget ordinances, do the second reading of property tax ordinance, and start reviewing the fees resolution. This is all, for those of you that have been through it, there's a whole slate of ordinances and resolutions we need to adopt by the end of the year to effectuate the budget. And if all goes according to plan, December 3rd, which would be our last regularly anticipated council meeting of the year, we would approve that fee resolution, complete second reading of all the budget ordinances, and the budget process is complete. December 3rd, obviously, that gives us some time, if necessary, to push additional meetings into December as council deems fit and necessary. Guiding principles, and these have continued through the last couple budget cycles, and we'll look here in a moment at the strategic plan that this council adopted several years ago. But these are kind of our overarching principles as we go through our budget process, right? To live within our existing revenues, to use one-time monies generated by new development for one-time capital projects, so that we're not banking ongoing needs on one-time revenues, to make investments to help and grow and diversify our tax base, and to increase services in priority areas when needed and when sustainable funding is secured. So on that sustainability, question, of course, that Mr. Fritz and I are always asking ourselves as we put this budget proposal together is how do we ensure we're meeting demands in a financially sustainable way now and in the future? I think many of you who are paying attention to the regional news have seen example after example of jurisdictions who are struggling quite a bit more than we are financially. And our goal, obviously, is to avoid that same conversation in Woodinville. So we are very conservative in our budgeting approach, and we'll kind of go through some examples of that here. The graphics, I won't spend too much time on these particular ones. Because we'll get into some more detail later in the presentation. So don't worry too much about those at the moment. Council guidance, of course, is one of the pivotal pieces as we work to formulate this budget. And this is your strategic plan that we adopted in 2022. We're coming to the end of that 4-year period here very quick, and we'll be due for a refresh through the next cycles to guide our next biennium. But I know all of you are familiar with this. You have it at your dais seats in your binders. One of the things, obviously, that drives what's in your proposed budget this evening is the workload demands. From those of you that have been around for a number of years, permitting and the associated workload has been the kind of banner story every year and all the workload that comes along with that. We are seeing, I think it's probably going to be a very short-lived minor breather especially compared to the last few years. Again, those of you that have been around, they have been record year after record year of permitting levels as we've dealt with a number of large projects and the kind of background level of smaller projects. Right now, in just conversations with a lot of the developers on their projects, they're kind of pausing while they evaluate what's happening in the financial markets. But I know we still have some big projects on the horizon, St. Michel being a good example, I think. Hopefully we get back to a more manageable, 1 or 2 projects at a time, not 5 projects at a time, which has been the case for the last probably 3 to 4 years. Infrastructure is really going to be one of the names of the game as we move into this biennium, and you'll see some investments accordingly in this proposed budget. And this is as we wrap up design and permitting on several of our really large capital projects that we have coming up and start moving into construction for a number of them. Examples include obviously our trestle project, I think in 2026, if all goes according to plan, our roundabout over here on the north end of the new 133rd, which will start construction next year. And then, of course, we're going to start working on the permitting or the planning and design of the Eastrail as part of that RAISE grant process. So we've got some big actual moving dirt projects that are coming up that are going to take a lot of our effort in the next couple of years. And then, of course, programmatic requirements, and this comes from items like the strategic plan, but also conversations at the council level more recently as we see continuing demands for more services, and as the complexity of those service levels increases. Surface water is a great example of that. Our permitting requirements from the county and the state level only get more onerous every time that it's issued. HR, as our organization grows, and the complexities passed down from the state on HR get more and more difficult to make sure that we're fully complying with. Community engagement, I know through the work of the Community Engagement Committee, there's obviously quite a bit of interest from the council in really ramping up that activity. Economic development is the same way. We've heard a lot of conversation about what can we do to make sure that we're stimulating that tax base as much as possible. Public Works Division of Duties, we're going to get into that quite a bit here. But as our organization, I think, matures and grows, some division of duties and a conversation around that is really necessary. And you'll see that reflected in our budget proposal this evening. All right, revenues. We've gone through this a little bit earlier this year, but the current picture here, you can kind of see across the different revenue funds, if you will, kind of the trends from the past few years, going back to 2019, 2020 budget. So general fund, for example, we're seeing a 7.8% increase in the revenues there. At the same time, a pretty sizable decrease in the restricted operations, and that's primarily permitting and plan check revenues. As I mentioned, some of that development activity kind of tampering off. There a little bit restricted capital, which is a lot of the impact fees that are associated with that development. We're expecting a little bit of an increase there for some different reasons. And then swim utility is about that 6.4% for the biennium, and that largely reflects the CPI amendment that we do every year by council policy on that. So overall, anticipating kind of minor growth in revenues.
Mr. Buchanan, Councilmember Best-Campbell has a question.
Sure.
So under general fund, you're talking about where we're going to see minor sales and property tax increases. Do you have a number for sales and property tax increases, school zone cameras? So we haven't necessarily talked about that yet. Is there a ballpark figure that you have in mind for those? When you say minor, I mean, again, we're dealing in hundreds of millions of dollars. It could be $50,000, or it could be 20. I know that you're probably not going to have that tonight because the ink is barely dry, but is this some information that you can maybe tease out?
We have it. How fast we can dig it up, we're working on it. So we'll see if we can get to that. While he's digging for that, the one thing, and this goes back quite a while now, and I don't know that all the council is familiar with this program, was the state streamlined sales tax mitigation payments that the state implemented a number of years ago when the states transitioned from a origin-based sales tax collection method to a destination-based sales tax, which was kind of a national trend at the time. What that meant for us at the time is our sales tax plummeted quite a bit because we had a couple of large manufacturers here, and they were largely in the construction field, kind of around roof trusses, I know was one example, where all that, when they produced those goods here, the sales tax, regardless of where they were getting delivered to, the sales tax got paid in Woodinville. When that changed to they pay the sales tax where those roof trusses are delivered, our sales tax plummeted for a period of time. To mitigate some of the impacts to the local jurisdictions, the state at the time implemented what they call the streamlined sales tax mitigation payments. That number started quite high for us, and over the years it's tampered off. It's actually ended by statute or got close to several times, and our lobbying down in Olympia helped extend that program several times, but it finally is set to sunset here in 2026. So those payments have decreased quite a bit over the years, but it will finally, with the last little bit, will taper out here in 2026. Go ahead.
So the school zone photo enforcement program, we're just basing numbers loosely off of what some of the other jurisdictions have experienced, and we're assuming right now in this budget over the 2-year period with the program launching late in 2025, a total of $900,000 in revenues through enforcement. And then there's offsetting expenditures, of course, that.
Well, that was going to be the next question. So the $900,000 is what we bring in. What are we taking out versus what it's going to cost to run?
We've got that number, and we'll make sure we have the full picture of that here in the department-specific page. So we'll look at that. The other piece, and I don't have the number at my fingertips, of those kind of 3 or 4 buckets on that first plus line item there, the sales tax and property tax, we're being very conservative and not anticipating much of an increase there at all. Just because we're unsure of it at this point. The majority of that $2.6 million increase there is the school zone speed cameras, and probably even larger than that is the investment returns. Mr. Fritz and his staff have done really, frankly, an amazing job generating revenue there where it didn't exist before. And so the big chunk of that is as we continue, and you all recall not too long ago, he brought forward a proposal to kind of repackage some of those investments, mature some of them early, reinvest them, and turns out time that perfectly for the market, and this is the result of that. So that's really the biggest piece of, I think, probably the biggest piece of that. Summary of trends, we've kind of talked about them a little bit, but continue on those workload levels at frankly, organizational records. We, as I mentioned, seen a little bit of temporary breathing room on development. I don't think it's going to last too long. We know, again, we've got a couple of big projects coming down the pipeline. And this one ties, I think, to that second major bullet point is no breathing room and resource demands. Everybody wants to do more with what we have. We're not talking about tax increases at a property tax level, not a lot of revenue increases. So it's, we want to do more with the same amount or less resources. It gets difficult. And I think a big part of that now, as we've discussed at length, is tied back to inflation over the last couple of years. Everything has got ridiculously expensive over the last couple of years, and that hasn't really decreased, and we don't see it doing that in the next little bit. It's just got the pace at which things are getting more expensive has slowed slightly. It hasn't gone backwards yet. And then, as I mentioned earlier, moving to the final design stages and construction on a number of large projects. So it's one thing, and it's a significant body of work when they're in design phases. Certainly Asha and her team are working their tails off on that piece, but it's a whole nother animal when it goes to construction, and we've got to deal with all the, it would be nice to say we're going to hire a construction management company and they're going to go do it. That's not how that works. We do hire them. They help with some of the details, but frankly, the amount of paperwork, the public expectation management, everything else that goes along with the actual construction is a completely different animal and an even bigger challenge, I think, than the actual design phases a lot of times. Especially because you're doing it in real life as people are getting stuck in traffic and they aren't very happy about that. So we got to manage that too. And then as we mentioned here in previous, the level of service demands guided by the strategic plan. And again, that's examples of community engagement, economic development, et cetera. All right, overall, this budget, and we're going to build this out a little bit as we go through it, proposes a positive general fund operating margin for the biennium. It's a very minimal, but a positive. It includes, and I won't emphasize this enough, includes no property tax increase for the biennium, and constructs a significant number of capital improvements to reduce congestion, improve safety, and support new development. All right, budget overview. There's a lot of numbers here. I'm not going to go through all of them. We can certainly answer any questions you have on them. That's just the general overview. Really, I know what council's concerned about is the pieces we're going to go through by department, kind of what we're proposing to do in each department. This, again, the overview just kind of boiled down to really the two takeaway numbers. So this is the budget without transfers. Those kind of start skewing numbers, and we can certainly have a conversation about that if you'd like. But the general takeaway from this is we're looking at total sources of $154-ish million, and total uses proposed of about $110.5 million. All right, biennium over biennium comparison. Why did I have the capital improvements one? I don't think that red box is supposed to be there. Sorry for that. This is just looking at kind of the trends over time here. The percentage increase on the end there is the percent from the current biennium that we're just about to wrap up here in December. Thank you. That's important to note. I try to convert many of the tables. Some of them, apparently this one I missed. So those numbers look really small. Add 3 zeros to all those numbers. Besides the percent, don't add 3 zeros to the percent. That's all right. Department overview. Okay, so this is where we really start getting into the nitty gritty on this stuff, and I know is where council's probably more interested in, and makes more sense to anybody in the public that wants to know how the city's spending its tax dollars. These are just by department here. You kind of look at the increase or decrease compared to the current biennium, again, that we're about to wrap up. Generally pretty modest in there. Administration kind of skews it, but we'll talk about why that is. It's more of we moved numbers from one department to another for a particular staff position. City council about 13%, executive pretty flat, legal decreased by a little bit. It's the power of small numbers on that particular case. Administration increased a little bit. We'll look at that. Law enforcement is probably our biggest, is one of our biggest numbers. We'll talk about why that is. Public works, we'll look at that. Development services, and I think that decreases, and we'll look at its specifics, but that's largely attributable to kind of our less contractual services with less permitting review that we're anticipating in the next year and a half. Total operating increase, and this is just operating, this is not CIP, about 6.3% increase is what is included in this proposed budget. All right, staffing, and we're going to have a number of slides on this because it is one of the big pieces we get in this budget. I encourage you, and I'm not going to go through it right now, but I encourage you go through your the city manager's letter in your budgets, like page 4 or 5, I think, in there. It really starts getting into the details, the why behind some of the staffing we're going to talk about.
Mr. Buchanan?
Yeah.
Councilmember Edwards has a question.
Yeah, I have a question about the previous slide. I saw that the legal defenses were going down a little this year. I was wondering if we were impacted at all about the standard change potentially for public defense and that's happening. I know a lot of people have increasing costs because of that.
Yes, that we reflect in our law enforcement line item, and the legal is strictly is largely our retainer for our legal counsel services. So the part, and we'll look at it here, and as we get into the law enforcement police department, a percentage of that increase is attributable to what we expect in the public defense standards. That's a great question. I know a lot of jurisdictions are losing their minds over that number right now. Yeah. All right, on the staffing here. So kind of the trends all the way going back to 2006, you can kind of see how many staff, FTEs is the number that's vertical in the box there. At the top is the FTE per 1,000 residents. So you can see we have slowly grown as the city population has grown in the last decade almost, but it's still markedly below where we were in 2006 at kind of high levels there. Proposed staffing, so 2024 right now we're at 51.5. By the time we're done in 2026, this gets it to 55.8. We'll look at exactly what those adds are as we get into here. One question I know council always has is on our cost of living increases. And again, we are mirroring our longstanding principle of matching CPIW June to June every year, which for 2020, these should have been updated numbers. 2025 would be a 3.6% increase. 2026 would be a 3.0 is what we've got in there now. We typically adjust that depending on what the CPIW June to June is, which we'll know next July, August, somewhere in there. All right, I'm going to go through a couple slides on the staffing. This was kind of hard to show. Again, in the city manager's report, it kind of goes through a lot more detail about why behind some of these staffing recommendations and proposals, but we tried to break it down graphically. If you have questions on this, stop me, we'll go through this. I'm going to start with Public Works. There's kind of two departments that we're making significant staffing changes in. Public Works is kind of more, I wouldn't go full on reorg, but there's definitely some organizational changes within that structure there. So I'm going to start with Public Works, and then Executive is the other one, and we'll look at both of those. So Public Works, this is not the fully built out all the staff positions chart for Public Works. This is kind of the big functional areas right now. But the takeaway from this one is the management structure, which is the first part I'm going to talk about. Historically, the city in the Public Works Department has a Public Works Director and an Assistant Public Works Director underneath that director, who then helps oversee some of the different functional areas. And lines of business in Public Works would be capital projects, capital programs. It would be permit review. They do, Development Services does a lot of the permit review, but obviously there's an engineering component for a lot of these projects, especially when we start getting into infrastructure tied to larger projects. And then there's the surface water, the operations piece. So all the maintenance crews that go out and do parks and streets and surface water. So that's what it looks like today. There's a couple of positions that also work directly for OSHA are called out there, but you can kind of see the functional areas as it builds down from, that's what it is today. What I'm proposing, and this gets back to my earlier point about really starting to divide duties as those duties continue to grow in size and complexity, is repurposing that Assistant Public Works Director under OSHA into kind of three different positions. One of them directly repurposes the Assistant Director into an Operations Manager, who would then, and we'll get into this, so maybe I'll save that for just a moment. Instead of the Assistant Public Works Director, we'll have the Operations Manager, a Development Review Manager, and a Capital Programs Manager. Again, those kind of three lines of business that I mentioned that we're seeing growth in all of those. One of those is repurposed assistant, so it's taking one FT and repurposing it to another position. One of them takes, right now we have two senior engineer positions under OSHA's team. One of them is essentially promoted to a Development Manager position, and then it does create one new position under a Capital Programs Manager.
Councilmember Evans.
Do these represent promotion opportunities for these staff members?
One of them does. The Development Manager will likely. The Capital Programs would be a new position that, we'll get into some of the details, but not the staff interest in promoting up to that position at this point. And then the operations manager is the, really, I think, allowing our current assistant public works director to kind of specialize in that area. So there is some promotion there. They're not all promotion opportunities.
Okay, but people are going to be able to see that there is upward mobility by staying at Woodinville and they're not stuck.
Right. And what we'll get into as we get a little deeper into this tree is there are also some minor changes, not necessarily at the structural level, but some minor changes to get to that kind of laddering ability that council and the staff has discussed as a retention tool, right? So where it's not just all at an entry-level position, that there's some laddering as they gain more experience and skills that they can, to your point, stay with the organization hopefully a little bit longer.
I'm glad to see that. That's why I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Was there another hand or, okay. Stop me if we do have questions. Okay, so this really gets at the structural management of the organization, right? One of our biggest issues, and I know for a number of years, and Councilmember Talyor, I know this was one of your big concerns years ago, was really getting that permitting streamlined because there was a lot of delays in that process. We're still working through that permitting operational analysis and the implementation of those recommendations. That's still going to be, an in the works project. But one of the big pieces there is the bottlenecking of just simple amount of hours in the day. Right now, a lot of these projects, whether the development projects, capital improvement projects, go through our beloved OSHA. But there's only so many hours in the day for OSHA to be able to do this stuff. And so part of this is trying to push some authority down and some expertise down where those decisions can be made at that level as opposed to all at the director level, and trying to streamline some of this decision-making ability. Again, I talked to that in the budget letter and probably explain it a lot more eloquently than I am right now. All right, so kind of building out from that change in management structure. Right now, there is a surface, so the red boxes are kind of the new or the reorged positions as we kind of go through those different functional areas. Under the operations manager, we have an existing surface water coordinator that I'm proposing to have under that position. Also, that position, the operations manager would supervise the maintenance supervisor. Again, an existing position that oversees our parks leads and our maintenance crews for the different functional areas. Under the operations manager and the surface water coordinator, I'm proposing a surface water specialist. Right now, we do not have. So, and again, it's in the budget letter, it speaks to it much more eloquently. We, I would argue, have not done a great job meeting our surface water obligations as a function. By way of comparison, and it's never apples to apples, but I think a good comparison, City of Newcastle, I think they have 5 people in their surface water function. We right now have 1. And I think we've been doing kind of the bare minimum for as long as we can on that permit requirements, but it's certainly not the poster child of success in the surface water function. I think that's going to get more complicated. We have some ongoing conversations we've been putting off for a long time now with King County about taking responsibility for some of the surface water facilities that are in our jurisdiction that somebody lost the paperwork when we incorporated, and we just have been letting them maintain them for the last 30 years. I think their patience has run out on that, and so we're looking at inheriting a new slug of facilities that we're going to have to deal with, which again, I think underscores the need to really add some resources to this function. One of our primary obligations when we do this, when we talk about surface water and meeting our permit obligations, is our inspection and compliance piece, which has been we can do it when we have time, which is never, frankly. So the surface water specialist is really focused on that piece of it, the field work, the inspection and compliance work that really needs to have some attention. At the same time, I mentioned keeping up with our existing facilities and likely a slug of new facilities that's coming our way at some point. Right now, we have kind of 2 crew members who maintain all the ponds and everything else that goes into that system, of which I think there are hundreds of different facilities already. We have 2 people that take care of those and then try to supplement those in the summer if we can get enough seasonal help. We're not keeping up there. So this proposes adding a second maintenance worker too, so there would be a total of 3 maintenance crew that are dedicated towards maintaining our surface water systems across our city. I think I've actually adequately captured that, but again, stop me if we have questions. All right, in the development function.
Councilmember Best-Campbell has a question.
Just looking functionally on that. So the surface water specialist and the surface water lead don't work for the same person, right? So is surface water lead someone who just deals with sort of the nitty gritty,
they deal with
actually
the
touching the water?
Right, they're coordinating the maintenance. So they're
more maintenance?
Right, they're kind of leading their crew. So Both the maintenance supervisor and the surface water coordinator are proposed to be under the operations manager, so somebody can coordinate both those pieces. Under the maintenance supervisor, and this is as it currently is, you've got those 4 positions. You've got the facilities tech, the parks lead, the streets lead, and the surface water. We've kind of broke those into different functional areas. But those are the maintenance crews that you see out mowing the ponds, digging out the ditches, that kind of stuff. That's what that maintenance worker 2 and the surface water lead, that is a working maintenance position.
So is that when you say Newcastle has 5 people, does that, Newcastle's model of surface water management, do they have people who do these particular jobs? Or are we talking 5 people in Newcastle do the paperwork end of it?
The paperwork end of it.
Okay, so we're proposing to have 2 for the paperwork end of it and 1-ish?
2 and a fraction, because the operations manager, I'm expecting to have some expertise and ability to manage some of the permitting piece of that.
The surface water lead was a little confusing. So it's someone who mows the stormwater ponds.
Right, they're not supervisors. They're all union represented positions, but they kind of help our maintenance supervisor kind of coordinate their specific crews in those different function areas. So, Brian Meyer, who's our maintenance supervisor, has been forever, oversees them, gives them the expectations, but it's those leads that are helping manage the crews and making sure they're getting where they need to go when. All right. We're still staying in public works, so this is getting into that second kind of business line item, the development permitting review piece of it right now. So the development manager review, that's the promotional opportunity that I think Councilmember Evans was asking about. We have one kind of minor change there, not a structural necessarily, but getting back to the kind of the promotional opportunities or the laddering opportunities in your career. Right now, we have 2 engineer 1s kind of that are doing that work. This would propose keeping one of those and then promoting one to an engineer 2 level. So a little bit higher on the pay scale, but again, is that kind of career laddering opportunity to move up through the organization before they move out. And then finally moving into that capital programs manager piece, and this I think is going to be, as I hopefully conveyed, a really pivotal one as we get into some serious capital projects here in the next little bit. This is a new position here. Right now we have there's no new engineers proposed underneath that. We have an existing senior engineer and 2 engineer 1s that we're proposing to structure underneath this capital programs manager to help support that function.
Councilmember Arndt.
Yeah. And this is the position that you would hope to hire externally, and you're not moving someone up?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Our current incumbent senior engineer is a fantastic senior engineer. He's been doing that for a long time, and he loves what he's doing. He doesn't want to move up. So I think this is a critical position, I think, because, and it's not just managing these projects we have coming up, but this is right now creating that CIP is kind of an all hands on deck effort across multiple departments. I think we need to move as much of that as we can back into Public Works, the department that's responsible for delivering those. So coming up, helping develop the CIP list, develop project concepts all the way up and pushing through project delivery. I think that's going to be a critical position as we move forward. I don't see us letting up on capital project lists anytime soon. All right, executive. So this is the current organization within my department. As we know, we've got 2 assistants to the city managers, each who supervises a position. One is underneath that is on one side, we've got Jared, our intergovernmental affairs coordinator. On the other side, we've got Alana, our community engagement coordinator, city clerk, and executive assistant. That's as it looks today. What I'm proposing here is on your right. It has the assistant city managers. I'm dropping the to the. It's not changing the pay. It's just changing the dropping the to the. And underneath each one of those, we will continue to build out some capability of the functional areas that I've asked them to be responsible for. And I think it's important to note, I explained it in my letter, those 2 positions right now oversee, those 2 positions oversee functions that in other cities, including cities of our size, have their own dedicated staff. Human resources is a good example. We don't have a dedicated human resources person. Right now, Alex Herzog handles that with the assistance of our executive assistant in my department. As we continue to grow, that becomes an issue pretty quick. Economic development is handled under here. We have budgeting, helping the finance department with that. Our CIP management is also coordinated through this department. We have intergovernmental, of course, is a big one. All those functional areas that we typically jurisdictions have dedicated staff to, we don't. We've kind of asked them to be kind of jack of all trades there, and they have done that, but those responsibilities continue to grow, and I think dropping the to the is an important recognition of that increased responsibility and expectation there. These two, so you'll notice comparison here, this had an executive assistant. That's been a position for a long time in my department. Under this budget, with her upcoming retirement, I'm proposing to change that to a management analyst position under one of the assistant city managers. Again, I get into it in my letter a lot more eloquently, but one of them, and both of these, is responding to some of the council requests and discussions about more resources allocated to specifically community engagement and economic development, but also recognizing that we've got some big kind of doesn't fit easily somewhere projects that are going to be managed, and I think the RAISE grant is a great example. Sure, there's going to be a lot of public works involvement in that, but somebody's got to help manage all the paperwork and coordinate all the moving pieces behind something like that massive project. So making sure we have resources for that in the upcoming biennium. So under the one assistant city manager, I've got intergovernmental affairs coordinator, proposing a management analyst there. That could be, that is the repurposed executive assistant there. So that would start the first of the year. On the right-hand side, the management analyst under the second assistant city manager in the red box there, that would be a new ad. And that one is proposed, I think, to begin the second quarter of next year. But again, both of those, and it doesn't lay it out here specifically, but one is obviously on the one side more focused on community engagement, adding more resources there. On the other side, adding more resources on economic development and HR support specifically. Council member.
Councilmember, we all get 1 or 2 times 5 minutes.
This is a budget study session.
Well,
we don't limit the budget to 2 5 minutes. This is a study session. So I'm not to be able to ask any questions
that is a
to
council
clarify.
rule. Councilmember,
that is not, is it the council rule that no one is allowed to ask questions on a budget we just got on our desk
Point of order. We've agreed we have 2 5-minute sessions unless there's agreement.
Point of order, well taken. You've been advised in the past that to hold your questions, you have 2 5 minutes. It's the same rule for every council member on every business item.
All right, now we start going through, so that was staffing. Again, happy to entertain questions on that. We can do it one-on-one or council's got questions. But start moving into the different departments. So kind of just going in order here, we're starting with the council department. We've got about a $69,000 increase projection there, and that is largely the result of the salary increase that was implemented in the current biennium. So that's, I think, really the big piece there. Legal, we saw in the previous table a minor decrease. That's really the reduction to the miscellaneous legal. So we've kind of had that catch-all number in there in the past. But due to trends and our use over the last couple of years, we're comfortable moving that down slightly. It's a decrease of a whole $36,000 over the 2 years. Thank you. And that's a great point. This is up for the biennium. Executive. So as we're going through there, we're seeing about a $26,000 increase, 0.5%. Services decreased by about $530,000. A big chunk of that is the $350,000 that we had in the current biennium for the NERTS efforts. We expect that to be wrapping up. Hopefully not have to spend a whole lot of more money on that next biennium. For several bienniums we've had, and this budget doesn't include, I think we can put that off for a little bit, the tourist district parking study for that property that we're about to acquire in the tourist district. One thing that I didn't mention the last one is we bring more HR capabilities in-house with the management analyst structure that I proposed. This includes eliminating costs for outside consultants to the class and comp study that council regularly requests, and be able to bring that in-house with additional resources in-house. Salaries and benefits right now, that's a big increase number. A chunk of that is a general wage benefit cost increase from those COLAs that we saw, and our benefits as those continue to increase year over year, the cost for those. One thing that I think will tamper this number a little bit, we won't know until we actually hire positions. Right now we've got some big numbers that go into that number on assumptions for benefits. So when we have vacancies or anticipate vacancies, we budget for like the most expensive benefit package, not knowing if they're going to come in with a family and spouse and all that stuff that we've got to cover. So we kind of hedge our bets there and estimate high. And then a couple of changes in positions that I mentioned and went through previously, the change in exec assistant to the management analyst and the additional management analyst position. We also have increased investment in community engagement. We've got just a couple of the ones there that I know we've heard from the community engagement subcommittee. the accessibility web tools, YouTube streaming, quarterly mailers, annual newsletter, video services, website refresh, et cetera. So increasing our investment in that community engagement function. In administrative services, so this is finance and IT, we're seeing an increase of about 17.9%. The big of that 535, it's kind of misleading. A big chunk of that was that position was originally budgeted in Public Works and has now been moved to IT, and where it's housed now. So it's kind of just moving numbers. It makes this look like a really big increase. It's not a big increase in reality. We do have some, with all that grant money that we've been successful in securing, that does come with some strings, as we all know. One of those is some additional audits that we have to do with federal grants, so there's some increased costs included with that. And one of them, again, I know it goes back to the Community Engagement Subcommittee. It's not in my executive department because it's actually IT that will be doing that work, but the URL changed to get away from the woodinville.wa.us. Keep going for 15 minutes and go to just woodinville.gov is the goal there. Law enforcement. This is a big one. Large chunk of that, 1.3, over almost 1.1 of that is the increase in the sheriff's contract, and frankly, why we didn't have a budget for you a week ago after Blaine had been working his tail off on that. We got a call or an email about a week and a half ago that with that percent increase, so that starts skewing our numbers real quick. We had to go back and do a lot of work. So that was part of the delay. I apologize for that. That contract increase, as you might expect, labor contracts have finally been resolved with some significant increases. The risk insurance is a big piece that has increased over the last few years, and then continuing implementation of the body-worn camera program. Within this line item, as I mentioned earlier, we also have the school speed zone pilot program, a cost of $140,000 here. That is the operating piece of it. That's not the capital piece. The capital piece, I think we might have. Okay, 309 is the capital piece for the biennium on that. That is one pilot location, 2 cameras, 1 location. So it's a pilot program at this point. We can have a conversation, obviously, in the coming years about whether we want to expand that in the next biennium. Core Connect program, I think most of you are familiar with that. That's the outreach program for people experiencing mental health issues or other needs. BJ and his officers have really utilized that, have seen great value in that, and want to continue expanding that. So there's an increase of about $40,000 to support an increased service level for that program. To Councilmember Edwards' question earlier, the public defense we've anticipated. We're hoping that maybe the Supreme Court sees a little more reasonableness in that, and we don't have to do that, but right now we anticipate about a $60,000 increase for that.
Actually, I believe those increases here are contract cost increases and do not budget for the potential change in policy in terms of.
We'll have a look at that. I think there was an increase there, but we'll look at them. Okay, community court is reflected in that as well. Jail costs, we've got, that one's a hard one to forecast, obviously. We never know how many guests we're going to have on that one. So we do have returning the Yakima jail contract in this biennium is proposed. For those of you who weren't around a couple years ago before COVID, when Yakima discontinued that program, we've really made use of that facility as we have longer term guests that's a much more cost-effective facility to use than some of our more local facilities. So we're bringing that contract back. All right, Public Works. We've got about a 10.3% increase there. A big chunk of that is salaries and benefits as we looked at those different positions that I went through earlier. Another big piece, and it's a staggering amount when you think about what it is, but it's about $200,000 for cork material. All of you know some of the storms we had over the last couple of years. A lot of that stuff floated away, so that includes some money to replace some of that material, make sure that we're staying within spec on the fields out here. Intergovernmental services, so we've got the street striping program. We've kind of used one contractor for years that aren't quite meeting the full service expectations that were there, so we're looking at increasing that and being able to have a second contractor step in when we need to make sure that we're keeping up with our road marking program. And then I know one that council's had interest in over the years, we continue to increase that. It's been successful the last couple of years, is our sidewalk panel replacement project. Of course, it never happens as fast or extensively as we'd like, but we're making progress. I know, for example, our neighbors next door were very pleased with our new runway that they've got in front of their facility. That's a very important sidewalk, and they're very pleased with that. So we're continuing the program. We've knocked out a lot of downtown on that, but obviously still more work to do. So that's a $200,000 increase for that program. Public Works, usually this is a much longer shopping list, so I was kind of surprised from our crew. They like to come up with shopping lists. This year, in this biennium, we've got kind of 3 that I'll highlight capital purchases. One of them proposing adding a lift. If you look back at our budgets year over year, we spent a lot of money renting lifts as we do everything from tree maintenance to the holiday decorations, light bulb maintenance at different facilities. This finally, I think, just bites the bullet, and let's go ahead and just purchase our own so we have one and we're not renting all the time. So we've got a capital expenditure plan for that. We've got a second EV, and this goes back to the added position, the field position for stormwater. This is the stormwater specialist that for doing the inspection stuff. This is a second EV vehicle that we've got included for that. And then one that is an oldie but a goodie that we still are working on, our material storage covers for our yard. So we have all those, if you've been up there, I think some of you have, in our upper yard at our shop, we have a bunch of these concrete bins that hold everything from gravel to sand for snow plowing or snow removal, the waste from the street sweeper, all that stuff, those should be covered. A good example is the salt. When that gets wet, it freezes. We can't use it for when we need it. So trying to get those covers finally put on. Those are the big capital expenditures. Those are different technically than the capital improvement program. They're capital outlays, but still. All right, development services. We've got a $1.5 million increase. Really the big driver on that decrease is that $1.5 million decrease for contracted services. So this is our permitting review, our outside parties that we've got to do. I'll put one big caveat on this is that we are still working on hiring a building official. So that number could be highly variable in the next little bit unless we get that position filled. All right, operating takeaway. So this is always one we like to talk about, the trend line for expenditures through the biennium. You can see since 2014. So this is all operating revenues. And then I'm going to try to avoid getting super technical in the weeds on this stuff, but they're all operating revenues to expenditures. The anticipated, if you look at it this way, the expenditures exceed revenues by $519,000 for the biennium. However, and this is an important however, that number that picture flips when we exclude development services, the permitting function, when we remove that from the table. If you do that, the revenues exceed expenditures by about $500,000 for the biennium. And this is, again, just operating. We're not looking at capital in the whole city budget. It's important to note that this is by design. Development services can be highly volatile. Obviously, that permitting revenue is dependent on what permits are coming in, how big, how many. That number can fluctuate wildly from year to year. And we build fund balance over the years. We've done that. We've got a $3-point-something million fund balance in that development services so that we can kind of smooth those ups and downs over the years. So this just starts to look as permitting drops off a little bit, those revenues start decreasing, but we've built fund balance to cover that, knowing that that was inevitable at some point. So neither Mr. Fritz or I are concerned about that piece of it. The caveat with all of this is these numbers will absolutely change. Sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, these numbers will not be what we're looking at in 2 years. A good example is that when this council adopted the 2023-2024 budget, you'll recall that we had an operating across all funds operating margin of negative $1 million. Here in December, we're anticipating finishing that biennium actually $2 million in the opposite direction, so a $3 million swing over that biennium. So all that to underscore that, even if these numbers are somewhat scary today, those will not be the numbers by the time we're done. Then that's the result of our very, very, and increasingly so, conservative approach to budgeting, where we underestimate revenues and we overestimate expenditures, where we are likely going to make more money than we've anticipated, and we're likely going to spend less money than we have anticipated. That's how we've stayed in this position where we've got, and I don't have the table or the chart here, back on the earlier side, you remember the green line where it showed the fund balance year over year over year increasing. That's how we've got the $40 million in the bank, right? I'm going to go quickly through capital. Council's seen this. There's just one minor change that I'll call out on this. So these are the street projects that are anticipated. Again, very ambitious list. We'll see if we actually get there on all of these projects. Surface water and parks. The one change I'm going to mention in parks, after we had a conversation with council at the last time about the CIP, working with staff, we needed to increase the amount that we have budgeted for the stage and boat launch permitting and design. Obviously, that's going to be quite extensive permitting thanks to its proximity to the river. So we've, right now, that the last time you saw that number was 350. That 350 didn't include spending the money this year that we are actually going to spend on the permitting and design work that we've been doing. So that's 375 of new money for that, bringing that total to 650 for that design and permitting of that project. It gets a little wonky trying to explain those numbers, but hopefully that answers some of the questions there. And then facilities and property acquisition, the big change there, we don't do these very often anymore, but the property acquisition, as council has discussed in previous meetings, is the North Shore Community Rec Center acquisition. We've got $6 million budgeted. Council has seen that in a previous CIP. Oh man, I hope we're getting close to the end of this. I'm getting tired of talking. So takeaway, this budget, you saw most of this. So proposes a positive general fund operating margin for the biennium. I think it's not a big number, but it is positive, and I think that again is very conservative. Underscoring again, no property tax increase proposed as part of this budget. We've done that twice in the last 15 years, and I don't really want to propose that again because last time it wasn't a very fun conversation. Construct significant capital improvements as we've gone through, and I think this is the new one that I hopefully have helped council and the public understand. Begins to transition to a more specialized staffing model. We have, for our entire history, been a organization of generalists. Look at a different way of junk drawers where we're all kind of responsible for doing everything or chipping in where we can. That model, I think, has reached its end, and I think our staff has reached its end with that model. So this begins to transition away towards making sure we've got and to some specialization to make sure we've got the resources, the expertise, and the knowledge to do what we're being asked to do. And this is the last one. So the next steps, receive public testimony. Again, I should have probably asked you to do this at the beginning, but the budget hearing is still open. There is still an opportunity this evening for public testimony on the budget. And then the action from council this evening would be a motion to continue the public hearing to the November 12th council meeting. Thank you for your patience in going through all of that.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go on? Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Just a quick revisit of the reason for the increase for the boat launch.
Okay, so that one we had originally $350 budget for that. $250 was a grant from King County, $100,000 of ours. That, in consultation with Public Works Director and our consultants who are working on that project, was not going to be an adequate number to get the permitting design of that project done. So we needed to add $300 to finish the design and permitting of that project. That was the $350. I mean, it frankly comes down to an area. That's enough to do the boat launch piece of it and not really do the full-on design of the stage piece of it, which obviously is important. So adding the money to do that, we'll spend $225 this biennium, give or take. That's what the estimate. Okay, estimate to spend $225 this biennium. This $375 brings you to the total of the $650. That gets the project permitted and design complete and done.
I'll then follow. Are you done? I'm sorry. A follow-up question on that. So when we were discussing the boat launch, I had made a motion to use park impact fees towards that process. Has that been accounted for in that in the boat launch design and construction?
The answer is for this biennium, that's the way it was budgeted to be used. For the next biennium, the additional $300,000 is right now targeted to come out of the general fund reserve, simply because park impact fees were fully allocated out to all the other park projects. So, so that first $100,000, yes, it's park impact fees. The remainder, this new $300,000, no, it's general fund reserves.
Okay.
I can and add too, it's general fund reserve now. Because we have a practice, we don't budget using park impact fees until they've been collected. So if we do collect those in the biennium, that can just be moved to park impact fees instead of taking out of the general fund reserve.
Well, if my memory was right, it was based on the Eastrail project and collecting the park impact fees from that to go towards, a portion of those to go to specifically to the boat launch.
Yes, but it's more complicated than that. So it's the park impact fees that we collect from all the different projects get allocated to from the development projects get allocated to a number of different park-related projects. And if we're short in the one number, we've got to adjust things in the other. So right now, this includes just the first 100,000 or the current 100,000 under park impact fees. So some of it is being used for that. The balance, what we're talking about adding right now will come out of general fund, assuming that we don't get any additional park impact fees. If we do, we can switch those numbers.
Okay. I'd like to note that all council members, as you said earlier, we have an opportunity to sit down with our city manager and our finance director. We have about, at least three more looks at the budget and to ask questions. So we have 3 meetings to ask questions. We have opportunities, every council member, to sit down with our experts to ask more questions, to get more familiar with it, and I encourage you to do that. I would like to give kudos to, I've talked to several mayors and council members around the area. They are having serious struggles with their budget. Some jurisdictions are having layoffs, or having budget deficits, and having serious conversations of cutting back. Some jurisdictions are talking about cutting back on fire and police, and different difficult conversations. So kudos that we're avoiding those conversations. I'd like to emphasize that we have a budget surplus and we're not raising taxes. And in this environment, I think that's a credit to the council, and it's a great thing that we're doing, being good fiduciaries to the residents that we represent. I wanted to mention that the Core Connect program is mentioned correctly, that it's behavioral health, but it also helps people that are experiencing homelessness in Woodinville. So it is an important program, and I'm glad that we're continuing that. And I guess that's all I have. Any other questions? Comments? Seeing none? Have a motion?
I move to continue the.
We're going to continue.
We should take any public comments.
Yeah, we're going to continue the public hearing.
Yeah, so take public comments and then a motion to continue the public hearing to November 12th.
Okay. Anybody public comments? Okay, motion to.
We have someone raising their hand in the audience who would like to speak in public testimony who did not have an opportunity to write it down. Are we going to say that this person may not speak?
All you had to do is raise a hand. I just sat down. Alex Campbell, your husband's going to be allowed to speak.
Actually, I had my hand up before she walked to the sign-up sheet, so you carefully didn't watch. Actually, Alex Campbell, live in city limits. I didn't have much to say because this only hit the internet at 4 p.m., so I only really got to hear it just now because I work. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I was quickly trying to go through the minutes. I don't believe the council has passed the enabling of an ordinance for speed cameras. So why is it in the budget at all? Are you assuming, or have you gotten a vote via some other means that that's going to pass? It's highly questionable. So speed cameras, as you're going to use them, let's be clear, are not going to protect our public schools. You're planning to put them right next to the KFC because you're going to claim that the daycare where every child is dropped off in a car needs protection for walkers. And you're going to do that because it's the highest revenue stream, which I believe is $900,000. I appreciate the city having money, but I think you should be honest and say you're taxing drivers. So plenty of evidence on this. Oh, by the way, Ken Moore's traffic engineer that came said specifically, speed cameras are the last activity. You do them after you've done everything else to the road you could. Nothing's been done to reduce speed on that road. So that's my public comment with no actual preparation time. And I hope to see the budget amended appropriately to be based on what the current laws allow. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? Seeing none?
I move to continue the concurrent public hearing to November 12th, 2024 in the Woodinville City Hall chambers at 7 or as soon thereafter as may be heard.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next business item number 8 is council-driven discussion on initiative measure number 2117. I don't see Mr. Hill, so Mr. Buchanan. I need to. You're pointing these up there? Okay.
Mr. Hill is with us remotely this evening. So he's got a presentation, and then I think what you're about to get at is there's a process that we have to follow by state statute.
There is a process we have to follow that anybody wants to speak for it or against it gets an opportunity to do that before we get into that. Mr. Hill.
All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Millman and council members. I apologize for giving this presentation remotely. I am homesick today. This agenda item came from discussion of council members and is to consider adopting a resolution that opposes Initiative 2117. The majority of resources for this item can be found in your packet, but I want to just take a few minutes to go through the logistics of this initiative. As you can see here on the screen, there are 3 paths that the legislature can take when an initiative is submitted. This initiative was filed in 2023, and in the 2024 regular session, the legislature did not act on the bill. They took no action, and therefore it is being submitted to the people for approval or rejection on the November 2024 general election. So what is Initiative 2117? This is taken directly from the Washington State House of Representatives Office of Program Research, but 2117 prohibits state agencies from implementing any type of carbon tax credit trading, including the Climate Commitment Act, and repeals the cap and investment program created by the CCA. A full list of usage of CCA funds is available through the state legislature, but the focus of these funds is designed to go towards projects focused around environmental stewardship. Again, this is taken directly from the state legislature website, and this is the ballot measure summary. Some additional information for you. Effective date on this, if the initiative takes effect, is 30 days after the election. And just to clarify, because I know sometimes that gets confusing, a yes vote would prohibit state agencies from imposing any type of carbon tax credit trading and repeal legislation establishing a cap and invest program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm happy to answer any questions, but the resolution can be found in your packet, as well as sample motions available on the staff report. And as Mayor Millman mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, members of the City Council and if present, members of the public will be afforded an approximately equal opportunity for the expression of views in support of and in opposition of Initiative 2117 prior to any council vote supporting or opposing this measure.
Thank you, Jared. Any questions? Well, let me actually start out with anybody in the public want to speak for or against 2117? Okay, any questions for Mr. Hill? Is your light on, Councilmember Taylor? No questions for Mr. Hill? Do I have a motion?
I move.
Sorry, hold on. Councilmember Taylor.
Will we have a discussion after the motion?
Absolutely.
I moved adoption of Resolution 649, a positive initiative measure number 2117 concerning carbon tax credit trading.
Second.
At a second, somewhere? Councilmember Edwards?
I seconded it.
Okay, a motion and a second. Deputy Mayor, you have the floor.
I believe it's important to highlight this item. One of the really important things that Washington is being a leader here on is to actually counteract some of the externalities that take place. So they're enabling carbon tax trading and enforcing that in order to help us meet some of our climate action that we actually need to have take place. It's a very small part, but one of the important things on a global level is what that actually enacts. On a more direct level for the city of Woodinville, a lot of the grants that we have applied for and received actually will come out of some of this climate action and carbon credits that actually take place. So this is not just harmful and being a globalist. This is also directly impacts us locally for things that we want to do that that we could actually be disabled from. This will take money out of the transportation budget, which will take money out of the coffers of the citizens of Woodinville.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I just want to say I was involved in taking the petitions around my neighborhood and gathered a lot more signatures than we have people up here on the dais. And some of the community businesses also had and collected probably 1,000 or so in just this area. So it's pretty popular. The act was enacted in 2023, and prices at the gas pump, in the grocery store, and costs to power homes and businesses immediately increased overnight. This tax trickles down to consumers in a number of ways. The carbon auction has increased prices on gasoline, and producers are passing this increase directly down to drivers, and we're paying roughly 30 to 50 cents per gallon of gas and about $500 on average per year for that gas. So every one of us is paying more, $500, and it's kind of hidden in the price of gasoline. Delivery services and drivers are paying more to deliver goods. We're paying more for those goods in the stores and their services. So it's a ripple, and it's part of the cost increase that we're all experiencing and talking about right now. Energy costs for heating and taking care of our homes have increased nearly 40% for Washingtonians, and the energy providers are restricted by this act from listing the CCA as the reason on your bill. So you don't see why the cost is going up, but this is a good part of the increase. The administration, the governor's administration, has lied to the residents by claiming that the Carbon Commitment Act would only increase costs by pennies, even though he knew it would increase about 50 cents a gallon. Right now, gas is average $4.14 in the state. I can go to the reservation and pay $3.04. So there is definitely a big impact, and it's every gallon you buy, you're paying. And if you're in the business and you're doing a lot of commuting, it adds up. So a lot of the neighbors, we sent these petitions out. A lot of the neighbors were Democrats. They were Republicans. They were independents. I think 40% were Democrats. So it really crosses party lines, and it's kind of like when you see the price on the pump go up that much, and you realize you can go to another state and pay a lot less, that there's something wrong here. And with this act, we have not seen any measures of improvement for that hard-earned money. We don't see any kind of measurement or metric that shows, are we effectively reducing carbon in in the climate? We don't know. There was an initial website that was set up. It was taken down because it didn't show there was much improvement. So this is just an opportunity to tax indirectly and redirect the money from drivers into other administrative. A lot of it is planning types of projects. They haven't even hit real projects yet. So,
Councilmember Edwards.
hold on. I also want to say it's also endorsed by Affordable Housing Coalition. It's also endorsed by the BIAW Home Builders, the Washington Retail Association, Ethnic Chamber Coalition, and several chambers of commerce around the state. So there you go. And farm bureaus. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Thank you. I think Deputy Mayor Randolph did a great job of highlighting already some of the points about how it impacts us both locally and globally, so I'm not going to repeat those. But what this also, the motion on the floor also does is supports our legislative agenda that we previously were working with in terms of environmental stewardship and things such as our climate action plan. If this were to pass, it would repeal aspects of the CCA, which would actually go against the things that we're hoping to achieve in terms of our advocacy. And I think us being able to make our voices clear here in terms of the impact it has, again, within our own community, this is a chance we have to really make our voice heard for our community right now.
Councilmember Evans.
How much money are we going to get from the CCA?
Jared, I can answer that. It's right now. So, if you look at the list, I think it was in your packet of programs, state funding programs. It is substantial.
Yes.
On our trestle alone, it's hard to say, and I haven't gone through and verified for sure. But our move ahead money, $5 million for the trestle, is definitely in jeopardy. We have a ped and bike safety grant that is definitely in jeopardy. There is the questionable whether the TIB grant, another $5 million for that isn't. So just alone, that could be well over $10 million of just the trestle project. That says nothing, and I know these programs are included in potential cuts, like our safe routes to school programs, like that we use for sidewalks along some of our school zones. That would be in jeopardy. So today, the number is big. Perpetually into the future, the number is substantially bigger.
Yeah, so at least $10 million, probably more. Again, as Councilmember Edwards said, our council spent a good amount of time working on a climate action plan because we are committed to having a climate change initiative that makes Woodinville a clean and safe place to live, work, and play. All of us want lower taxes. Everyone wants lower taxes. But the truth is, it takes money to run the state. It takes money to run the city. You know, roads, bridges, bike paths, none of that is free. It all costs money, and we have to invest in our future. I'd also like to point out that if this passes, if 2117 passes, it will absolutely upend our state budget, which is already facing major shortfalls. Look at all the cuts that all of our school districts are having to make. That's because there's not enough money to fund them. Look at what is happening to health and human services. That's because there's not enough money to fund them. The state has already made a lot of really tough cuts, and if this passes, everything is going to be on the chopping block. I'd also like to point out that Brian Haywood is a hedge fund multimillionaire. He came from California and left California by his own admission to avoid taxes on his earnings. He's sponsored and succeeded in getting 4 of 7 initiatives onto the ballot. The goal is to roll back the progress that has been made in this state under Democratic majorities. I just have to say, you know, it is unfair to ask people to suck it up and live in a dirty, it's just awful to push the burden of paying for clean air, clean water, improved roads, improved bridges, improved transportation, improved ferries, and everything back to the middle and working class people. I say vote no on this because we have committed as a city that we are behind climate change. Our city is on the hook to lose at least $10 million, probably more. This would significantly hurt the people of Woodinville. Thank you.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. I don't have a long speech, but I think I would just like to emphasize all of the points made by my colleagues. It is difficult when you present something to someone as, do you want to pay more for gas or less for gas? I think we all would say less, but I think when you look at where that money is going and the things that it is funding for our community, those are worthwhile things. Not only the benefits to our climate and our environment, but our infrastructure. We just sat through a very long budget presentation, and if we take out that $10 million, we will get to sit through another long budget presentation, which will have a very different conclusion. So I'm going to support the opposition for this.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I just want to point out a few fallacies that I've heard. One is none of the CCA funds are being used on road and bridge maintenance projects. So that's out. The other is the schools have, the state has a $19 billion surplus over the last 6 years, and funding it with the gasoline tax and siphoning it, putting it off into other projects doesn't work. And then if the goal is climate commitment and reducing carbon, let's measure the performance of that project and make sure it's working. That's all. We need to have some measures in place, and right now it's just wide open, and it's a surefire way of getting more money siphoned into pet projects that don't have anything to do with reducing carbon. So there you go.
I always try to wrestle with, there's people ask for lots of stuff to come on our agenda or proclamations or, and stuff that isn't Woodinville centric or Woodinville doesn't have a direct impact on Woodinville. I usually try to stay away from. This is one where all of our neighbors are in support of no on 2117, and we were the only one at that point. And looking at it, Deputy Mayor Randolph and I looked at that, and as Councilmember Evans stated, we have $10 million at risk for Woodinville for some very important projects to Woodinville. So that's one of the many reasons why I thought we need to take this up. It does in fact cut the transportation budget in the state. If we repeal funding for that, traffic is going to get worse. There's going to be lots of bridge and road projects. There's going to be culverts and clean water, and there's wildfire mitigation that'll be impacted. And here locally, $10 million is going to hurt to some very important projects, and some of them are very sustainable transportation projects, particularly on our Eastrail corridor. So I'm in support of the motion, and this is something that's very impactful to Woodinville and to what. When I talk to people around here, traffic is a problem in King County and the area. We've had lots of people move into King County and Woodinville, and traffic is a problem, and we need transportation dollars to mitigate some of that. So, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, can we have a roll call? Well, can you restate the motion, please? It's been a while.
It has been a while. I will have to move to adopt Resolution 649 opposing initiative measure number 2117 concerning carbon tax credit trading.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Aye.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Arndt?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
No.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Thank you. Public comments. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Report of the city manager. You done talking, or you got more for us?
I'll keep it short. One item this evening, my unfortunate duty to report that we have received notification from our colleagues at King County Solid Waste that the nurse decision has been pushed out to the first quarter of next year. The reason given was vague. They're still responding to the 1,800 plus comments that they received as part of the draft EIS public comment process. So we're expecting sometime in the first quarter, hopefully, the final EIS, which may or may not include the actual decision. And if it doesn't, it may or may not happen 1 to 5 weeks after that final EIS is issued. So there's some real specifics available at this point. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports of council members. Councilmember Evans.
Just real quick, there's an Eastrail committee meeting, our quarterly committee meeting that is open to public on Thursday. And I encourage you to go see the Eastrail website to sign up to get a link for that.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, two things today. First, if you're interested in applying for a SCA committee or board, they extended the deadline to October 30th. So if any council members are interested, you're free to apply still. And second, I just want to welcome new Commissioner Anderson. I'm looking forward to see the work that you do on the Planning Commission, as well as I want to thank outgoing Commissioner Liang for the years of service he provided to Woodinville. He often went above and beyond to make sure that our community was informed and engaged in the process. So I want to thank him and also thank Commissioner Anderson going forward.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Nothing this evening, thanks.
Councilmember Best-Campbell.
Two things tonight. One, there was a public comment made about executive session, and I know Mr. Ganson's not on tonight. Is there a way that he could give us a primer and a refresher on, so we don't have them very often, what our responsibilities are, what are the rules of executive session, what can we discuss, what can't we discuss, and under what circumstances is there allowed to be conversation with outside organizations, so that we're all clear on that. The second one is, let's go back to my notes here. October 17th, which is 10/17, at 10/17 local time is the shakeout. It's where you plan and duck and cover and reaffirm that you have all of the dried beans, rice, and water that you think you're going to need in an emergency. Having grown up in California, I will tell you that you actually do need to do that. There is a website, how about that? It's a nationwide program called shakeout.org/Washington, because that is indeed where we live. We know that the Cascadia plate is there and it's ready to unzip. It's important to know what to do, how to turn off gas, how to help your neighbors, how to have a radio, all the things that we need to work on. So I will be taking part of that on the 17th, and I encourage everybody else to have a plan, because earthquakes never tend to happen when it's convenient.
Councilmember Arndt.
Thank you. Two things tonight. Tomorrow evening, Wednesday, the 16th at 5 p.m., the NPRSA will be hosting a special meeting at which we will be discussing potential siting locations for the Youth Recreation Center. That meeting is held not at our usual location or time or date, but it will be at the Senior Activity Center in Kenmore, which is actually Rhododendron Park, for anyone who is interested in attending that public meeting. Also, I had the wonderful opportunity to attend the Harvest Festival at 21 Acres this past weekend, which was put on by our friends at Pollinator Pathways and 21 Acres and all of those wonderful partners. And it was a fantastic event. They were speculating that they had a larger crowd at that event than they had at their Pollinator Fest in the spring. So just really a great opportunity for our community to get out, celebrate our farm history, and learn more about the agricultural roots of our community. And one of the important things that came out of that is that everyone who attended that event, if you've ever been to 21 Acres, they have about 4 parking spaces. So all of those hundreds of guests were finding parking around the city and then walking to their event, which worked wonderfully on a sunny Saturday. But it did highlight, again, the need for thinking about creative solutions for moving people from where we have existing parking in our city to where events might be. And so I just would encourage us to bring that back to council and think more about how we can invest in that for our residents.
Councilmember Taylor.
Nothing for tonight.
I wanted to, I went to the NPRSA meeting and I advocated for our site. At that point, it had been made public knowledge through a contract that we hired a consultant to walk us through the purchase of the property. So once that became public knowledge, I was able to talk about that in public. So we had a good presentation on the pros of our site. It wound up being scored. It's the highest scoring site that's been presented to NPRSA at this point. So I'm optimistic if they stay with the highest scoring site as was calculated by an independent contractor. Again, I'm optimistic that we will be chosen and we're working towards that. So that's an exciting opportunity for Woodinville to have a community rec center and a pool. So I look forward to more conversations on that. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.